The CoCo Crew Podcast is hosted by CyberEars. If you are serious about your podcast hosting needs, you should check out CyberEars. Whether you are a podcaster, a radio host, a musician, a narrator, an audiobook author, or simply a school, church, corporation, or anyone else with an audio recording that needs to be hosted or distributed, you should check out CyberEars.com. Unlimited bandwidth, fast, reliable, and rugged servers with no hidden fees. CyberEars. Your audio, your terms.
Listen. It's getting closer.
Hey, you got your CoCo 3 yet? Hey, you got your CoCo 3 yet?
You are listening to the CoCo Crew Podcast, a delicious adventure into the world of retro computing news and information featuring the Tandy Color Computer. All right, CoCo Cruisers, welcome to episode 22 of the CoCo Crew Podcast. I'm here. This is John Linville, your normal loquacious host, joined by my partners, Neil Blanchard. Hello, Neil.
Hello, John, and everyone else listening.
And Mike Rowan. How are you, Mike?
I am good. How is everyone out there in Coco Land?
Well, hopefully they're all well. At least a few of them. Oh, wait, hopefully most of them. We all should be doing well because our big pilgrimage time to for our Mecca in Lombard, Illinois, our Coco Fest, coming up just 1 month away now. Just a little over a month as we record this. Very exciting for me. I know very exciting for you guys. Are you excited, Neil?
Oh, I'm definitely excited. Counting down the days.
That's the Canadian version of excited for our listeners. Mike, you excited?
Yes, it's like Christmas Eve every night now for 5 weeks.
Yeah. Oh, and just like Christmas, sometimes we find excuses to open our presents early. And so I know the three of us and a couple of, at least one other buddy, are headed out to VCF East in a couple of weeks. So kind of get our April celebrations of retro computing off to an early start. Very exciting stuff.
This is
warm up
time.
Yeah,
Coco Fest warm up.
Yeah. So with that in mind, what are you guys working on? Getting ready for Coco Fest?
Yes, I am. Actually, just as we're recording this now, as of 4 hours ago, I finished the last joypad adapter. All 60 DINs are done.
Wow.
Right.
So that translates to 20 adapters?
That's right.
Awesome. Hopefully those will be good sellers again this year.
Yeah,
What
and
else
I have a new product as well to go with it. I have a CoCo to Dragon joystick adapter. I made 10 of those up. So we'll see how those do if anybody's interested in those. It basically just converts 6-pin into 5-pin, so you can use your Tandy joysticks on your Dragon.
Yeah, so that should be really cool. I would think that'd be popular for the people in the U.S. who've driven that poor man out of California digital crazy, buying up those Tano Dragons. And now they got only have Tandy joysticks to work with them. Hopefully they'll be able to use that to play some games on their Dragons. That should be cool.
Yeah, nice addition.
Yeah. So Neil, we'll switch to Mike, but I know both of you have kind of been working on building up some cartridge stuff. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. We've been in the cartridge building business for John, building up copies of your game. So good to get back into the game of copying and burning ROMs.
Yeah, so we worked it out to do a little profit sharing on that, I think, and have those available for CoCo Fest attendees. And I'd say the cartridges are still selling pretty well, I guess. I sold a couple of the leftovers from last year on eBay and for a Farfall, and one of them sold for $70 and one of them sold for $100.
Fantastic.
It's not bad, huh?
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Good game, though.
Yeah, well, it's fun. I've been working on a new PCB for better games. I kind of mentioned it earlier in the previous episode's tech segment about adding the audio hardware. And then I don't think I mentioned it, but or maybe I did. Anyway, I'm hoping to have. I'm designing the board to have both the audio hardware and the bank switching hardware in the ROM. Similar to the way the RoboCop and Predator cartridges do the bank switching. So hopefully, once that cartridge PCB is out and available, we'll be able to get some bigger games with better sound. So something to look forward to, but it's kind of it's a not so exciting incremental step for now, hopefully leading to better games in the future. But I still have to get that done and working. I've got most of the design or most of the layout done, but still not quite ready to ship off to be manufactured. So tick-tock for me. How about any acquisitions? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you surprised me with that because I didn't know you were going to add the MMU on that as well. I thought it was just the sound portion.
Yeah. So to be fair, the computer scientist in me wants to make make sure you know that it's not really an MMU because it's just bank switching. It's not that exciting. But it will let us have bigger games up to let's see. Well, I guess the design that I've got right now will be able to accommodate up to 64K of game code and data. Split across 4 16K banks. The fundamental design can go bigger than that, but you have to adapt it. You have to have the chip that will actually accommodate it. And so to go bigger than that, I need a bigger chip. There are bigger ROM chips out there, but that's the one that I picked. So we'll see if we can fill that one up and move on from there. Anyway, moving on. How about any acquisitions this month? You guys pick up anything cool?
Well, I had some of your lovely proto boards. Those have been selling, so I had another run of those made. So if I'll have them at CoCo Fest, and if anybody else is interested, of course, you can reach out to me for proto boards for the CoCo if you're hardware oriented.
Awesome.
And, I've been doing a lot of playing with modems, and I've been playing with some of the older Tandy, the DCM3, the DCM Pack, the DCM5. So that's been pretty fun. I might bring a pair of those to CoCo Fest, figure out something to do with those.
Yeah.
And then go ahead.
I was going to say, I know you and Boise have been talking about setting up your private BBS network.
Yeah.
Should be fun.
It'll be fun to connect up over analog over the internet again. And it all started because my old house, I've wired up rotary phones and they actually work. So that got us started talking about this. So.
Oh, that's funny. Cool. How about you, Neil?
I picked up on eBay just recently a set of Tandy speakers, the multimedia ones. It's a little unit that sits underneath your monitor. I've been looking at them for a while, so I figured, I'm gonna take a chance on a set. Looks kind of cool because it's got dual inputs, so you can run something from the Orchestra 90 card, plus on the other input, maybe off the audio out port on the CoCo as well.
Yeah, that should be cool.
Nice.
Those are pretty neat. I've always thought those were kind of cool. Harkening back to the days when I had a 14-inch CRT sitting up on top of my computer or whatever. It's kind of nice to have something to set your monitor on. But yeah, they're kind of cool. You kind of aim the speakers right out at you. It just looks perfectly in place for that era of tech. It's kind of cool.
It's kind of like sitting in a sports car.
Exactly. Oh, goodness. All right, so I picked up a couple of items I think that are kind of interesting. One, Neil kind of pointed out to me that it was out there. It's the eBay listing says low-tech 8-bit ISA Tandy-compatible sound adapter. And so what this is, it's an ISA card, a PC compatible, it's 8-bit PC compatible card. And you can plug this card into a normal PC, and then in many cases you can trick old DOS games that had support for Tandy's audio chip. You can trick them into playing through this card instead, so you can add the Tandy audio, which was a little better than a standard PC speaker and quite a bit better than the standard PC speaker. You can get them to play through this card. Now, I don't do a lot of DOS gaming, but I thought it's interesting because this is the same audio chip that I'm experimenting with for the CoCo. And then if you remember from I guess it was the last episode when we talked about the Burke and Burke adapter, which isn't really a hard drive adapter so much as it's a bus adapter from the CoCo bus to the ISA bus. So I'm hoping to experiment with plugging this card into a Burke and Burke adapter, and then taking some of the software that I've been writing to work with the music chip on a CoCo cartridge and adapt it so that it could play to the music chip on this card through the little Frankenstein hookup. I think that'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, that would be cool.
We'll see how that works out. Anyway, so I think that's kind of neat. Sort of in a similar vein, there's someone who has gone through and let's see, I'm missing the name here. Someone's gone through and built cards with the SPO 256AL2 sound chip on them, based on Tony DeStefano, however he's pronounced. The guy who did Full Turn of the Screw, one of his designs, and they're making them available for sale on eBay, $25 or whatever. So I picked one up. I haven't got it yet, but I'm looking forward to playing with that. Especially
you outbid me on that one.
Oh, did I? Oh, there's been 2 or 3 for sale. I picked this one up for $27. I've seen a couple go in that range, but anyway, it should be something fun to play with. It's basically a chip on a card with a stereo output. I've never been too excited about speech, text to speech or whatever, but sometimes it's fun to play around. So we'll see how that goes with this one. And then the one I just pulled off today, right before we recorded, long-time listeners have heard me talk about these Tandy program pack files, and they show up from time to time, and they're couple of us out in the community find them highly sought after or whatever. I saw one pop up on eBay and buy it now, so I jumped on it, and very excited to have picked another one up to add to my vast and impressive collection of them. So sorry while I gloat, Vincent, but anyway, this is just one more.
They'll look nice with your own cartridges in them.
Yeah, it will look good. I'll start stuffing them with those red cartridges. That'll be fun. Just let's see, how many spots do they have on them? I've lost my picture.
Yeah, what do those things hold?
Yeah, here we go. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 16, I guess. So I just need to come up with another dozen games or so. It's no problem. Just give me a few years. We'll be all right. Anyway, so that should be fun. I will eventually run out of need for these things, but I'm not quite there yet.
Well, we can always invent the super pack case.
There you go. Get some of those produced too. Anyway, Well, that's probably it for me for the introduction. You guys got anything to add, or you'll take a little break and come back with some announcements?
Sounds good.
I think that's good.
All right. Well, CoCo Cruisers, hang on just a bit, and we'll listen to this note from our sponsors, and then we'll be back with some announcements.
I felt alone and isolated. Sure, email and social media are great, but I wanted something more. Something in real time with real people. I was in a rut with the same old routine. Then my doctor told me about CoCo Fest.
CoCo Fest, held in Lombard, Illinois, is proven to help people break their routine and increase the enjoyment of their computer hobby.
It was important to me that CoCo Fest didn't involve harsh chemicals. The fact that it reduced my feelings of isolation helped get me that confidence to participate in the CoCo community.
Some people had changes in behavior, thinking, mood, innovative and beneficial thoughts or actions during or after CoCo Fest. If you notice any of these, contact others right away. Tell others about any history of mental health improvement, which will likely accelerate while attending CoCo Fest. Use caution when operating vintage computing machinery. Common side effects include trouble sleeping, feelings of anticipation, joystick thumb, and increased levels of vintage computing activity.
I'm very proud. I love myself as a CoCo Fest attendee.
Ask your doctor if CoCo Fest is right for you.
All right, now we're back with some announcements. Before we get into our standard announcements, we wanted to put in a little community service item here on behalf of Glenside. The Glenside, of course, is the Glenside Color Computer Club, who sponsors the CoCo Fest, the main event of our year. Unfortunately, it's not quite a laughing matter, but unfortunately, one of the key members of the club in terms of organizational muscle has fallen a bit ill, and this is Bob Swoger, and he's not been able to conduct as much of the club's business as he normally would be right here before CoCo Fest. And so one way in which that manifests itself is that Bob has been trying over the years. He's been trying to offload some of the signing up of vendors or exhibitors. People get a little confused over the term vendor. Mostly it's exhibitors at CoCo Fest, I think. And by having people send their exhibitor forms to him instead of to Tony, the club president, and normally that works out fine. They communicate, no problem. But since Bob has been under the weather, some of these forms seem to have gotten, they're a bit lost in the shuffle is what it amounts to. And we're not sure if this is going to get settled in time for CoCo Fest to pull off smoothly. So we wanted to note that for anyone listening, if you've sent in a vendor form or exhibitor form for CoCo Fest, and if you send it to Bob instead of to Tony, then please redirect that to Tony. And let's see, I don't have his email address handy. It's just tonypodraza@gmail.com. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
tonypodraza@gmail.com. And you may want to copy, John Mark Mobley on that, and that's going to be John. So it's johnmarkmelanie@gmail.com. So it's JohnMarkMelanie@gmail.com. If you've sent your stuff in by email to Bob, please resend it by email to Tony and copy John Mark. And if for some reason that doesn't work, then the form actually has a snail mail address for Tony on the form. You can just put the form in the mail to Tony. And that way you don't show up at CoCo Fest hoping to have a table and not having one. It also helps, whether you get your table or not, it also helps the club and Tony in particular to be aware of how many people are coming and how many people are expecting tables, which is a key thing, and helps the startup of the event go much more smoothly. So if you are a vendor please make sure that your intent to be a vendor or exhibitor at CoCo Fest has been made, that you've made Tony Pedraza aware of that specifically. If you've sent your stuff to anyone else, then it may have been lost. So apologize for this inconvenience. The illness can sometimes be unforeseeable, or at least the timing of it is often unforeseeable. And so your cooperation is appreciated. All right. Well, with that said, let's move on with our standard announcements. We are the CoCo Crew Podcast. We are available on Twitter as at CoCo Crew Podcast. That's all one word, CoCocrewPodcast, CoCo Crew Podcast. We are also available on Facebook as the CoCo Crew Podcast, and that's 4 separate words, the CoCo Crew Podcast. Type it all in and search on Facebook. I'm sure you'll find us. In addition, we are, of course, available for your podcasting pleasure on iTunes. We're available for streaming through Stitcher. We're all available through Google Play. And we are available on TuneIn, which is the service, podcasting service used by Amazon Echo. Amazon Echo, order stuff for John Linville. Oh, well. Maybe that won't, but it's worth a try.
Just built into the code now.
Yeah, exactly. In addition, we are a member of the Throwback Network. The Throwback Network is a loosely knit collection of retro-themed podcasts, many of which are technology-oriented around video games and home computers from back in the day. And in addition, there is also an apparently equally large collection of non-gaming podcasts, including podcasts like Rediscover the 80s, the Toys R Us Report, and other stuff that I don't even know what's about. Well, there's the Greatest American Hero podcast dedicated to the show The Greatest American Hero, a unique little bit of 80s culture.
I'll listen
whatever.
to that one. I haven't caught it yet. It's intriguing.
That was an interesting. If you don't remember the show, you should go and try to find it on Netflix or whatever. Definitely an interesting show. Anyway, so if you're looking for another podcast to listen to and you're not listening to us, then be sure to check out the other podcasts on the Throwback Network. Similarly, we are listed on the Game by Game Podcast Information Hub. This is going to be some of the same podcasts. There might be some that are a bit different. These are all technology-oriented gaming podcasts, many of which broken out by systems, Sega Master System or the Super Nintendo or the Magnavox Odyssey 2 or the Channel F or whatever. Anyway, if you're interested in other technology-oriented, gaming-oriented podcasts, again, go out and check out the Game by Game Podcast Information Hub. See what you find there. Audio for the CoCo Crew Podcast is, of course, hosted by Cyber Ears. If you have a need to host audio online, whether you're an audiobook author or a church or whatever else where you need to host audio online, then you should check out Cyber Ears, where you'll get your audio on your terms. When it comes to email addresses, we have several available for you to reach out to us here at the CoCo Crew. If you want to reach out to all of the hosts as a group, you can use show, that's SHOW, at CoCoCrew.org, CoCoCrew.org. You can also reach or use podcast, PODCAST, at CoCoCrew.org, or feedback, FEEDBACK, at CoCoCrew.org. If for some reason you prefer to only speak to one or the other of our hosts, you can reach me as John, JOHN, at CoCoCrew.org, Neil as Neil, NEIL, at CoCoCrew.org, and of course you can reach Mike as Mike, MIKE, at CoCoCrew.org. That's pretty much our standard list of announcements, although we also like to include pointers to gaming and retro computing events around around the world, really, but often mostly around the U.S. Let's see. Well, the top one here is actually already gone. So we're going to skip the playthrough gaming convention because that one already happened. Let's go and knock that one out.
I saw the pictures from that online, though. It looked pretty nice.
No, I did not make it there because I'm lame. But it seemed like it was a nice event. All right. Next up on our agenda is Vintage Computer Festival East, number 12. This is scheduled for March 31st through April 2nd in Wall, New Jersey at the Intro Age Science Center. Notice this is a 3-day event, March 31st being a Friday, which will have a collection of seminars and events kind of for the hardcore retro computing enthusiasts, and things like how to repair your old dead computer or whatnot. Whereas Saturday and Sunday have keynote talks and exhibits that are for maybe a little more softer core or introductory. That's if you're going to bring your kid or your wife or whatever that's not that interested in old computers, you may want to spare them the pain of Friday and take them only on Saturday or Sunday. That said, it is a good event. It's a historical site. The site is linked to the Marconi transatlantic radio transmissions from back in the early days of radio, and it's just kind of a cool old site. There's actually more than one museum on site. I'm not sure what else to say. It's a cool event. Looks like they've also picked up sponsorship by Hackaday, so I don't know how that'll affect the event this year, but it could only be good.
Let me just add. Well, we're all going to be there, so if you're there, try to find us. Also, since this is the 40th anniversary of the TRS-80, as well as the Apple II and the Commodore PET, they're having special exhibits this year. So they're calling them mega exhibits, I guess. So they're going to have a lot of TRS-80, a lot of Commodore PET, and a lot of Apple II. So it should really be a special event this year.
Yeah, no, that's true. That should be cool. Our sister podcast or whatever, the Trash Talk, will be there as part of the TRS-80 exhibit. Should be some really cool stuff. It's a good group of people, and they have a lot of computer history. They certainly they know how to put on a good show. So if you are in the northeastern part of the United States, or if it's not too hard for you to get there, then I highly recommend you get out there, particularly this year. So, should be fun. All right. Again, that is March 31st to April 2nd, 2017. The following week comes the Midwest Gaming Classic. This is held, where is the location?
Brookfield, Wisconsin.
Brookfield, Wisconsin. The Sheraton Milwaukee Brookfield Hotel. So I guess it's close to Milwaukee. Anyway.
Yeah, it's on the west of Milwaukee, yes.
What is it? The Midwest Gaming Classic is a trade show featuring 65,000 plus square feet of retro and modern home video game consoles, pinball machines, arcade video games, computers, tabletop gaming, crane games, collectible card games, and air hockey. And that's just the start. So it sounds like a big gaming event. I'm looking at their webpage now. I see cosplay people. I see people playing, old home computer games. I see people playing board games. I see people playing arcade games. It should be a fun event. So, if you are in kind of the upper Midwest, I guess is what you'd call that, then I definitely would try to make your way to the Milwaukee area for the Midwest Gaming Classic, April 7th through 9th of 2017. All right, next on the agenda. This is the big event for this podcast, at least for now. Talking about the 26th annual last Chicago CoCo Fest. Of course, it's hopefully not the last. We call it the last because we never know if there's going to be another one. This will be April 22nd through 23rd, 2017 at the Heron Point Convention Center in Lombard, Illinois.
The Heron.
Yeah, come out, touch the Heron. This should be a great event. Usually is a great event. Always has been a great event. Come out, hang out with us, see what projects people have been working on, talk to your favorite podcast hosts, spend some money at the auction, enjoy the barbecue on Saturday night. I'm sure great fun will be had by all.
It's going to be a good time.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it.
So come on out. We'll try to make Neil keep his clothes on, but other than that, no promises.
It's the start of the new year.
Yeah.
It is the start of the CoCo New Year. So should be fun. I don't know if Dick Clark will be there to have the ball drop, but, we'll see. No promises.
CoCo Cat might be lurking around.
CoCo Cat lurking around. Now, that would be hilarious. We should commission a new CoCo Cat costume. We just have to figure out who's going to wear it. Yeah. If we get Aaron Wolf to come back, I'll bet he would wear it.
Yeah, I could see that.
Aaron, if you're out there, we're thinking of you. And if you're willing to wear a CoCo Cat costume, let us know. All right. Feeling a little loopy this evening. So why don't we move on? So the very next week, Vintage Computer Festival Southeast 5.0. That'll be on April 29th through April 30th at the Kings Market Center in Roswell, Georgia. This is Roswell is a town on the outskirts of Atlanta. So if you're in the southeastern part of the United States, or if your travel there is amenable to you, then I would recommend you get out there. This is obviously another vintage computing event. It's not unlike VCF East, but it's not exactly the same either. It's kind of a different crowd of people, a different kind of group of exhibitors comes up, and they have talks, and it should be a cool event. Also held, I think this might be the last time that it's held. What is the name of the museum where it's held? Well,
drawing a blank too.
Yeah,
I just remember it as the old CompUSA.
Yeah, the actual location used to be a CompUSA. There is an Apple pop-up museum in there, as they call it, and here we go, Computer Museum of America. So they actually have a kind of, well, it sounds funny to say it this way, but a museum quality museum. And, it's on par with going to any other museum. I think it's a permanent exhibit with a lot of Apple history there. And I think they've started to expand out to some other computer history there as well. So it's kind of cool. You go and you can look at the museum stuff, and then you can go into the bigger part of the old CompUSA building and look at the hobbyist exhibits. Quite often you can play with the old computers and check out games, and usually they have some talks and whatever going on. It's a pretty cool event. So have not yet committed to going out there. This year, I've been in the past couple of years. It's a good event. And again, if you're in the southeast part of the United States, I would recommend it. So check it out. All right. So the next event on the docket here, also April 29th. This is the third Encontro Color Rio. I'm not sure. I'm guessing that means like the Club Color Rio Encounter, something like that. It's an event for the Club Color Brazil, sponsored by Daniel Campos. If you're in Brazil, particularly if you're in the area of Rio de Janeiro, I would highly recommend that you get out and check this out. it sounds like a cool event. They always have cool pictures from the event. The guys bring out their collections and do cool stuff, and it seems like a good bunch of guys overall. Notwithstanding any conversations we have later in the show. But,
we'll make it out there one of these.
It would be nice to make it down there. It's just it's a bit of a stretch, especially with so many other things going on in the month of April, huh? But anyway, if you are in Brazil or if you are close to Brazil, I definitely recommend you try to figure out how to get there. All right.
Yeah, you figure that's 5 events in April.
It is. It is a lot of events in April for some reason. 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, 5. Seems like I left something out too, but I think we've got everything on the list here at least. All right, well, moving on to June 9th through 11th. I think also back in Atlanta, the Southern Fried Game Room Expo 2017. This is being held at the Renaissance Atlanta Waverly Hotel and Convention Center. This is another event. The Southern Fried Game Room Expo features more than 250 arcade, pinball, and console machines. Let's see, this is fourth annual Southern Fried Pinball Tournament, tabletop gaming, a vendor expo, exciting programs and guest speakers, movie screenings, and so much more. The pictures looks amazing here on Facebook. They got a live arcade with a bunch of pinball machines. It definitely looks like a cool event. I feel lamer and lamer every time I go a year without going.
I'm going to try to make it this year. I have to see where I'm going to be in that time frame, but if I'm available, I'm going to go there.
Yeah, definitely need to check deeper into that, especially as it's creeping closer. I remember last year it seemed like it became difficult at one point to get tickets. So you may want to plan early. All right.
I should know by April.
Any bootleggers outside with some tickets, maybe last minute.
Yeah.
Speaking of planning early and getting tickets, the next event listed here, July 18th through 23rd, 2017, Kansas Fest. Now that is Kansas Fest, of course, is an Apple II oriented event. If you notice the if you notice the length of time, that's what 5 days, 6 days, 18, 19, 20, 6 days. This is basically a week-long event where Apple II geeks get together and move into a dorm at Rockhurst University in Kansas City, Missouri. Yeah. I always feel like I'm messing that up. And they get together and they have seminars and talks and they play games and they retrograde their old Apple IIs. They even start off the event with an Apple II giveaway or a giveaway table, which is kind of cool. It's amazing there's not more people that walk away with bloody noses with all the stuff they're giving away.
I'm definitely going this year. I've never been, so I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, but you didn't get a golden ticket, though, did you?
Well, no, I did put my name in for the drawing. They had 5 golden tickets they were giving away, but at least they were nice enough to inform me I wasn't chosen.
Yeah. No, I see the list of names here. No one I recognize, but no, it's cool. It's a cool event. I've been once. Keep saying I want to go back. If you're determined to go, it makes me more likely to go. Well, we'll see. Anyway,
bring a CoCo.
There's no reason you couldn't.
Yeah. Maybe I will.
It says registration opens for everybody, golden ticket or otherwise, on March 31st. So, if you by the time you listen to the podcast, you got just a little bit of time left to start registering for Kansas Fest. And again, it is an Apple II event, but they seem pretty friendly to me as a CoCo person. I went and gave a little talk gave a talk on Farfall and a talk kind of comparing the CoCo to the Apple II for those that didn't know. They even have Atari 8-bit guys that seem to continually show up there for some reason. They seem pretty friendly with those guys as well. So it's a good event. Go and check it out, and I think you'll have fun. All right, moving on. Here's one I'm not really familiar with on a personal level, but sounds kind of cool. The Commodore Vegas Expo version 13.0. That'll be July 29th through 30th of 2017. This is the Fresno Commodore Users Group and Las Vegas Commodore enthusiasts have worked hard to make this year's effort the best Commodore show in the United States. Let's see. Meet other Commodore and Amiga enthusiasts. See demos and presentations on and about the Commodore 128, Commodore 64, Plus4, DTV, VIC-20, PET, and Amiga. Come and present your own Commodore projects. Find those hard-to-find goodies at the vendor table. And, of course, the exciting Las Vegas. That last part might be the best part for me, but if you're a Commodore person, I'm sure the rest of it sounds pretty good.
Yeah, and high rollers get their rooms comped.
So, sounds like a cool event. You might want to go and check it out. All right, the next event listed, the CoCo Expo, August 5th to 6th of 2017. This is the one up in New Jersey. Let's see, can't find the location. Go through this every time. Anyway, it's a CoCo event. If you're interested in CoCo collectibles, ColecoVision, Cabbage Patch Kids, or whatever else, then you might be interested. This is here it is, Edison, New Jersey. Again, that's August 5th and 6th. The prices to be a vendor still look pretty high to me, but maybe it's a cool event. Again, you're going to see Tyler Bushnell there pushing his vision of the future of arcades. Again, you'll see this very attractive young lady, Sophie Reynolds, who is an actress known for Gamer's Guide to Pretty Much Everything and Mostly Ghostly 3, One Night in Doom House. So I'm sure she must have stellar acting credentials. I don't know. Anyway, if you're into CoCo and you're in New Jersey or close enough on either event, then you may want to go check that out. Unless, of course, you're on the West Coast, because also those same dates, August 5th through 6th, you're going to have VCF West number 12. So this is sort of the West Coast corresponding event to the VCF East. Never been to this one. Held at the Computer History Museum in Mountain View, California. I have been there. Pretty cool place. If you're a vintage computer geek and you are on the West Coast, you probably want to make it to VCF West 12. So, all right. Well, that's all our events. We have one more announcement in the table here. Again, we mentioned I've got the links available with a number of downloads for promotional audio tracks made by our own Mike Rowan, promoting the CoCo Fest 2017. If you are, a producer of an audio show, a radio show, another podcast, vintage computing podcast, or whatever, you want to help us support CoCo Fest or help promote CoCo Fest, we have a link in the show notes for these audio tracks, and you're free to run them, and mostly unmodified. I'm sure if you need to edit them a bit for length or whatever, that's probably fine. But otherwise, have at them and help us promote CoCo Fest. All right. Any news or announcements I've missed here? Going once. All right. Sold. All right. Let's take another little break, and then we'll be back with our massive news segment.
Hi, Candy Weller here again. April is my favorite time of year, and I absolutely love to decorate for CoCo Fest. Looking for some great ideas to freshen up your home for CoCo Fest season? Don't want to break the budget? Here are a few helpful hints. First, you can dramatically give your home that CoCo vibe with, ta-da, fresh paint. The CoCo offers all the inspiration you need. I went with Tandy Beige as the base color and used red, green, and blue accents that match the color computer case badge. Be creative. You can do a lot with just these 4 colors. My home has a lovely stair banister. I purchased 40 feet of rainbow ribbon cable and wrapped the railing to create a warm, colorful style. Finally, if you're like me, one of the highlights of the CoCo Fest season is a pre-fest party. Impress your guests with simple party favors. I prepare a small gift bag for my guests that includes a 3-ounce compressed gas duster, a giant iced sugar cookie, and a 5.5-inch floppy diskette sleeve, and assorted red, blue, and green sour candies. And you can be very creative with refreshments. Visit our website to get the full recipe for our fabulous nuclear green punch, sure to please everyone. Until next time, I'm Candy Weller, wishing you the happiest of CoCo Fest. April 22nd and 23rd in Lombard, Illinois. Become part of the equation.
All right. You guys ready?
Roll.
Ready. Oh, wait. Hold on. All right. No, there we go. We're good.
Oh, wait. Breaking news. This just in from the original gamer, Stevie Stroh, has a very special announcement for us. I wanted to share some news about this year's upcoming CoCo Fest. So what we hear is that the official news is that Steve Strobridge has reached an agreement with Nick Morentis of Popstar Pilot fame, and Nick will now have Popstar Pilot t-shirts and a special edition CoCo Fest game package of Popstar Pilot available via Steve Strobridge and his booth at the CoCo Fest. This is very exciting news. Steve has produced DVDs, now for 2 years in a row, with video from his game reviews, and he has a service lined up that helps him produce those packages and make nice packages to distribute at CoCo Fest. And I guess that same service has, since Nick releases his Popstar Pilot game on a DVD, I guess it's the same service is applicable to Nick's work. So this is good news. So we're going to have another outlet for getting Popstar Pilot. It sounds like there'll be some sort of special CoCo Fest pricing. So, if you don't already have Popstar Pilot and you were looking for a reason to come to CoCo Fest, there's one more reason for you. What do you think, gentlemen? Mike, what is your thoughts on this important breaking news?
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's just great. The game will be available, and T-shirts sound pretty awesome. If you haven't, like you said, if you haven't got Popstar Pilot, just another good reason to come to CoCo Fest and get a special price on it. So that's great news.
Yeah. Don't forget, even if you have got Popstar Pilot, it might be a great opportunity to get a variant, which we know how collectors love those. Don't they, Neil, Mr. Variant?
Oh, definitely. I was just thinking about the same thing, actually. You can even keep one sealed if you want.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's the way to do it.
All right. Well, this is awesome news. You've heard it here first. Again, we'll repeat that Steve Strobridge has reached agreement with Nick Morentis of Popstar Pilot fame. And Nick now will have, even though Nick, of course, is down under in the great country of Australia, and unable to physically join us for CoCo Fest, but Steve Strobridge is providing a way for Nick to get Popstar Pilot merchandise available to us for purchase at CoCo Fest. So with that piece of breaking news, we'll get you back to your normally scheduled CoCo Fest episode. All right, Coconuts. Now we're back with some news. Before we get too deep into our news segment, I wanted to mention, I kind of intended to mention this earlier in the introduction, but I just completed watching today a documentary that was pointed out to me by Ben Anding, who was an attendee at CoCo Fest this past year and someone who's kind of a part of our little group of friends. And he mentioned this documentary, Man vs. Snake, The Long and Twisted Tale of Nibbler. And he mentioned it because there's a scene kind of early in the movie that is it's actually filmed at the Heron Point Convention Center in Lombard, Illinois. So it's the exact same place where we hold CoCo Fest. Particularly, it's the room where we hold our auctions at CoCo Fest, and it's unmistakable. And even though it was filmed in like 2008 or so, the room looks exactly the same, for better or for worse. So that's kind of cool. But mention it also because it's a cool documentary. For those that have seen another documentary called The King of Kong, which was a video game documentary or a documentary about the guys competing to get the world record score on Donkey Kong, that was released several years ago. This one is similar. It has some of the same people in it, even Billy Mitchell and and Walter Day from Twin Galaxies. But this one is about a guy trying to set the world record or reclaim the world record on an arcade game called Nibbler. I personally had never heard of Nibbler. It looks like kind of a cool game. But it's kind of a cool documentary if you're into watching a out of shape middle-aged geek set a goal and work to achieve it, and put his heart into it and that sort of thing. It's kind of inspirational. So anyway, not really news, although it hasn't been out that long. I think it was released late last year, but it's kind of has that connection to CoCo Fest, sort of, and that is in that same location. But I suspect plenty of people listening to this might have a soft spot in their heart for an old guy trying to set a high score on a video game. So you may want to check it out. So I've got the link to that at the end of the show notes. So go ahead and take a look. All right, moving on to our regular news. So if you're looking at the show notes, you'll notice that the first 3, 6, 9, 12... the ridiculous number of the entries of our news segment at the beginning of our news segment all come from Alan Huffman, and I think we mentioned before that Alan he's been part of the community a long time. Sometimes he's more involved than others, and when he becomes involved, sometimes he spins up and produces a lot of content in a fairly short amount of time. And that's kind of what he's doing right now. And so he's producing content related to developing code in Color Basic, interfacing Color Basic to assembly language, rewriting stuff to make Color Basic better. There's a couple of extra things in there, like talking about an all-RAM based BBS that he had written back in the day. Anyway, there's a lot of it. We're going to include the links also to he's working with John Strong on a piece of hardware that makes use of the SN76489AN audio chip that I've been talking about a bit, although they're taking a different approach. They're talking to that chip over a serial port. I'm going to reserve judgment on that for now. I am a little skeptical about how effective that'll be, but it might work out. We'll see. So anyway, the links are going to be in the show notes. They're basically, many of them are multiple parts of the same series, but there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's like 5 different series with multiple parts of them in here that Alan's been blogging about. It's a lot to cover. It's pretty good content. Alan's a fairly talented writer. You can check it out and see if it interests you. Glad to have that content produced for the community. I might prefer to have it metered out at a more regular pace, but we'll take what we can get. What do you think, guys?
Good, definitely. Additional content out there, yeah.
All right. So there you go. Check it out. Take a look at what Alan's been producing, and see if you can contribute your own equivalent. That'd be cool. All right. Moving on. The next item watching Doom run on a TI-83 graphing calculator. And so many people will be familiar with these TI-83 calculators. They seem to be kind of standard issue in middle school or high school in many places across the country. Maybe not as many people are familiar or aware of the computer inside them is essentially a Z80 based computer, not unlike the processor in the the old gray black and white TRS-80s, and is actually capable of running quite interesting code programs. And so anyway, this article here talks about somebody running Doom on there. I wasn't quite clear if it's really Doom or if it's something that kind of looks a lot like Doom, but still kind of cool that you could play a first-person shooter style of game on a 6 megahertz Z80. So I don't know, included here. Thought it might be cool, might be inspirational for some CoCo programmers out there. Just kind of set a bar for what should be possible.
It's pretty cool to watch. You should give it a look. And I found it very reminiscent to Gatecrasher.
Right. Very much like Gatecrasher. So pretty nifty. Gatecrasher, of course, being Nick Morentis's implementation based on technology demo from Sockmaster from 10 years ago? 15 years ago? Pretty long time ago, but runs on a CoCo 3. I think Nick and Steve Strobridge did a YouTube video about that not too long ago, for those not familiar. Anyway, there you go. There's a mark on the board. What should be possible? Feel free to write your own Doom-style game engine and get it on the CoCo. Neil will play it, I know.
Definitely. And Gatecrasher is a good game, too. I don't mind that. That's fun.
It is.
It's hard to believe it's this old. It's that old now.
Yeah, it is kind of weird, isn't it? Anyway, moving on. The next link, The Secret Upgrade, How Expansion Chips and Video Game Cartridges Push Performance. This is from Benj Edwards, who is an author that writes a lot of retro computing articles, kind of all over the place. But anyway, goes on. It's sort of a photo essay, I guess, talking about how a number of the later home video game systems of the 80s and early 90s, as the technology started to get a little long in the tooth, they kind of augmented the base systems by putting sound and video chips on the cartridges that could improve what they were able to do. And so some people may not be aware of this history, so I thought it was kind of cool to include that there. And for those who still haven't quite figured out what I'm talking about when I'm talking about adding audio to a CoCo cartridge, well, this little link here pretty much explains exactly what I want to do there. And, if we can figure out how to put a video processor on a CoCo cartridge, we can do that too. I think that one doesn't present itself quite as easily, but it could be done. It's not outside the realm of possibility. Just a matter of making it happen. Anyway, so kind of a cool little link. The next link, this is Steve Strobridge's Retro Swag. So we haven't mentioned Steve that much in a while, but of course he's a YouTube personality that spends some of his time reviewing color computer games. And he seems to have a soft spot for the CoCo. In fact, he's going to be joining us again for CoCo Fest this year. He's got a swag shop, as he calls it, a place now you can go and order gear, as what Neil calls it, festwear, I guess you call it, or fest gear.
Yeah, festwear.
Festwear. And so he's even got one specifically. I'm a CoCo nut that shows like a CoCo 3 setup. And so something that's interesting to note here is that the artwork behind these T-shirts or whatever is actually produced. I don't have his name here. It's Rick Adams' son.
Joel Adams.
Joel Adams, yeah. So there's a connection back to the CoCo through the artist there. So pretty cool stuff if you're looking for some geekware, particularly stuff that proclaims you as an ancient gamer or whatever. Then you may want to check out that link and buy you some T-shirts. Help out Mr. Strobridge.
Yeah, that's cool artwork.
You picked up one of his mugs.
I did. I got the I'm a Coconut mug with the it's got the Joel's drawing of the CoCo 3 and the MPI and the disk drives, and it looks really sharp. I like it.
Yeah, so it's neat, and it's sort of a specific style, or I don't know if specific is right, but there's a recognizable style to the drawings. You can kind of tell they're all drawn by the same person, I guess is what I mean. And it's pretty neat. It's kind of cool. Anyway, I haven't ordered mine yet, but I'm still kind of thinking about it. But I know other people have. So it may be the coolest thing to have at CoCo Fest. Everybody have to wear their I'm a Coconut shirt.
Big selection of items out there. Definitely worth a look, everybody.
Yeah. All right, the next link. The first generation of CDs is already rotting and dying. So more good news on the retro media front. So it's not bad enough now that your old floppy disks are dying. If you have old CDs, including I guess both audio CDs and data CDs, so they're physically falling apart too. And so let's see. The mean lifetime for the disk population as a whole was calculated to be 776 years for the disks used in the study. As demonstrated in the histograms in Figure 18 and 19, that lifetime could be less than 25 years for some disks, up to 500 years for others. So I don't know. Maybe it's a mixed bag, but you never know if your most important file is going to be on that disk that goes bad in 20 years. So something to be aware of. Not really a big issue for CoCo users per se, but if you're old enough to be an avid CoCo user, you're probably old enough to have some old PC CDs laying around as well. So you may want to watch out, or you might just have old Phil Collins CDs laying around. Who knows?
Phil Collins.
Yeah. Well,
That's a different form of rot.
Yeah. I like Phil.
I'm just kidding. I like Phil Collins too.
Yeah. And I saw that article, and I got to be honest with you, I didn't really want to believe it because I got a pretty good audio CD collection here, and I don't want to have to start backing all that up. Yeah,
well, it's probably worthwhile to rip them anyway nowadays because
convenience, I guess.
Convenience. It's probably like anything else. I mean, I've been hearing since I started getting into retro computers about how, oh yeah, all your old floppies are going to be shit. They're just crap. They're no good anymore, right? And still, here we are 20 years later, and I go and occasionally find a disc in a box that's been crushed and half bent or whatever, and you pull the disc out, and it's even kind of visibly not flat. Not creased, but not really flat, but you stick it in and quite often, it still reads, right? And of course, you also get them that look perfect and don't read. But, it's sort of a mixed bag there. But, to think that it's all 100% dead is certainly wrong. And so
I tend to think the same thing. It's kind of alarmist because I've got, I've got original discs from 1981, and they'll spin right up and they work fine.
Yeah, so it just sort of
look
depends.
At your. I was going to say, look at your tape collection as well. They still work.
Yeah, although the old tapes, you can sometimes hear they get a little sound like they're in a glass of water or something. Kind of depends on how they've been stored. I have these old reel-to-reel tapes that were like, mixtapes that my parents made in the 60s and early 70s. You can still play them if you can actually get the reel-to-reel player to work. And most of them sound okay, but some of them don't sound so great. They've not been stored with care at all. They've been like in a garage or whatever. But they still have sound on them. But again, that's sound and not data. So
yeah, and that's probably the key is how well the media is taken care of.
Yeah. All right. Well, moving on. Classic Tools Retrospective. John Romero talks about creating Ted, the tile editor that shipped over 30 games. All right, so CoCo people may not be familiar with John Romero, who kind of grew up in the Apple world, but John Romero also was part of id Software, so the people who made Doom and Quake and whatever, all those first-person shooters back in the mid to late 90s. But, before all that, he was an Apple II programmer and worked on a lot of games. And so he's talking about this tools that he used as a tile editor. So tiles is a way to do background graphics for video games. And I don't know, it's just kind of a neat technology overview from the past. It's not 100% applicable to the CoCo, but it's kind of in the wheelhouse. I thought people might enjoy reading it. So there's the link. Did you guys take a look at this at all?
Not a chance yet.
Yeah, that's all right. There is some cool stuff in here, I think. But anyway, so I mean, John Strong's going to do a demo of his tools at CoCo Fest. Some of his tools are based on tile editing and for background graphics or whatever. You're going to see some overlap in the technology between what John Romero's talking about in this article and what John's going to show at CoCo Fest. So there. Now you got to read it. Or not, just ignore me. That's fine too.
No, it's like a good read.
Yeah, so if you're interested in the technology behind video games, especially the retro classic video games, it's worth reading. So take a look. All right. Well, speaking of lots of updates from one person here, we've got Jim Geary. We didn't see much of Jim Geary in last month's episode, but he's back with a vengeance. I think some of these he may be trying to participate in the 10-line basic stuff. I'm not sure if any of these are 10 lines or not. Anyway, he's got a bunch of videos here. Roulette from the VZ200/300, another game, checkers from the VZ200, the Quest VZ, Coloroid, Curse of the Undead, Skid Row Adventure for MC10, Sokoban, Solo Poker, and then a Solo Poker update. So some of his games are coming from the VZ200. That's a machine that uses the same video chip as what's in the CoCo 1 and 2. Has a Z80 CPU instead of a 6809, but since that video chip is also used in the MC10, and that's sort of Jim's primary target, I think. Sometimes if you can find those graphic screens built around what the chip can do, sometimes it's easier to rewrite all the code that generates the graphics than it is to generate appropriate graphics based on the old code. So I think that's why it's kind of a prime target for Jim to cherry pick game titles from the VZ200, the MC10 and such. Anyway, you take a look at any of those videos?
No, I haven't had a chance to check them out yet.
I haven't either.
No. So they're pretty cool. I mean, they're basic games, they look fun to me, they're not the highest tech games, but it's cool to add them to the library of available stuff, particularly for the MC10.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's just crazy how much stuff Jim generates for that.
He does generate a lot of stuff. All right. Speaking of crazy, he'll appreciate that. The next link, Simon Jonason. He posted a link to his music player, a music player he's been working on. His blurb says, "I told you all that my music player did 4 voices with 50% CPU free. Here's a little proof of concept." So basically, he has a video and it plays some music. Can you hear that?
Yeah, we can hear it.
All right. And so that's 4 voice music playing on the CoCo. According to Simon, he still got half the CPU free. demo showing a scrolling text line doing a sinusoidal wave bounce or whatever. Anyway, so pretty cool. Simon's still out there doing some technology demos for hopefully to eventually produce the one demo to rule them all for the CoCo world.
I'm really hoping he does.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome.
All right, well, we'll have to see.
Make a demo or something.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's see the next link. Understanding DMA. So DMA stands for Direct Memory Access. And it's basically a way for peripherals on the computer bus to kind of take control of the bus and move data without having to involve the use of the CPU. Nowadays, it's just what's done, right? With modern computers, that's just very common for most peripherals to try to do that. At least ones that actually sit on the bus, like a PCI or PCIe bus. Not something that's a USB, although the USB controller itself might try to do the DMA. Anyway, if you don't understand what DMA is or how it works, might provide a little overview for the basic technological principles, just included here for the knowledge seekers among us. So
yeah, I read that article. It's a good article.
I can say on a side note, I'll never forget what DMA is, because when I first got my first PC after the CoCo, believe it or not, the 386 motherboard had bad DMA. I could not put a Sound Blaster card on there; it just would not work.
Oh.
And then I learned in one heck of a hurry that's what DMA was all about.
Yeah, it's a shame we don't have more stuff to do or anything really doing DMA on the CoCo. It'd be nice to, it's great to have the DAC for being able to play reasonably high fidelity sounds within 6 bits at least. But having to process the samples with the CPU is a real hindrance. If we had some way to set up a DMA channel to move those audio samples out to the DAC, would be a lot easier to write stuff to do sound. But alas, we do not.
We have to make do with what we have.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So here's another link, Hackaday, title, an old 68,000 SBC is new again. So what is this? Well, it's, so the 68,000 in this case refers to the Motorola 68,000, which is kind of like the big brother or big grandson, or I don't know, a much later and much more powerful CPU from Motorola than even the 6809, but still kind of the era that if you want to build a computer yourself with out of chips or whatever, you can still use the 68,000 and maintain some sanity. Whereas if you try to build it around, say, the hottest new ARM chip out there, and unless it's a specific kind of embedded one, you'll probably drive yourself insane. So I included a link here. There's probably a lot of people will be interested in doing projects around 68,000 or whatever. It's not really CoCo specific, but if you're into doing a little hardware hacking, homebrew stuff with a 68,000 processor, you may want to check out this link where somebody is kind of reviving an old design, and see what they're doing with it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know he basically attempted this because he was reading about it in a book, and that just makes me think that there are several good color computer books out there that if you want to get into hardware hacking and understanding the hardware, you can do the same thing. So if you're interested in learning about it, we've talked about books before on here.
Oh, yeah.
We should do a special segment before, but there really are some amazing, interface and experiment books out there specifically to the CoCo. So,
yep, definitely some good stuff out there. All right, let's see.
68,000 chip, that's pretty common, right? It's not as scarce. You can find those pretty easy.
I think you can probably still find them pretty easy, but I haven't really looked. But I don't think you'd have too much of a trouble.
Yeah, I mean, they're newer than the 6809, so there's several versions of that, of course. But yeah, I think those are easily available.
Yeah, that's good. And just don't be taking them out of good computers, that's all.
All right, well, moving on. The next link is from Guillaume Major. So as he mentions here, he says, after CoCo STC Explorer, here's BootPack. BootPack is a partition browser for the micro SD drive pack. It lets you boot partitions with a GUI instead of using the DOS command. It's compatible with all CoCos and requires 32K based on Sidekick by Luis Antoniosi. And has a list of features and whatever else. So the drive pack, that's the old Roger Taylor hardware, right? That he basically has an SD card device interface through a serial port. And so the device, the pack itself is essentially a serial card with this SD reader kind of hanging off of it. So that's what this software here is supposed to help you make use of. So I don't know how many of those are actually out in the wild. I'm pretty sure there are some. I've got one, but
I never got one.
Yeah, there was kind of
before my time.
There was kind of a dust up when Roger kind of left the CoCo list, and when he sold out his CoCo3.com to somebody who then kind of dropped the ball or whatever. And there were some orders that were pending for a long time, and anyway, I don't want to dig all that up, but if you have one of Roger's drive packs, this software might be for you. You may want to check it out.
Yeah, it's definitely would be a cool utility if you've got multiple partitions to boot from.
Well, let's see. Moving on. Here's one. This link. I'm having trouble with the link right now, but I'll try to get that fixed in the show notes. But Radio Shack's successor preparing to file for bankruptcy, sources say. And this was an early link, and now we know that it's basically true. If you have a Radio Shack, if you still have a Radio Shack in your area, you may again see it with the familiar, closeout sale signs up in the window. So the follow-on company to Radio Shack, the General Wireless, or I guess it was called, not doing too well, and they're closing more stores. There are stores staying open. I'm not sure how many that is as a percentage. I know when I talked to the local manager at the store that has stayed open near here, he seemed to not think it was a big deal, but he wasn't very friendly about it. So I'm not really sure. I don't know how. We thought Radio Shack maybe was still going to be around. Now we're back to not too sure about if they're going to be around or not. It's a little hard to say. So
it might have been a sore spot for him.
Yeah, I think so, but he kind of, I was trying to commiserate with him, and he kind of lashed out a little bit. So I don't know. Doesn't sound like good news to me. But
no, it's kind of death of 1,000. It's just they just keep closing more, and I think any of us have shopped there recently. You're just your jaw kind of drops at some of their prices too. So
yeah, and they're not particularly good. Even the sale prices are not particularly good.
The sale prices should be average prices.
Yeah.
I'm not going to complain because we don't have any Radio Shacks here in Canada, so at least you have something.
You're not missing anything.
Okay, well, moving on. Next link comes from Steve Strobridge, video capturing vintage RF systems. This seems to be a problem that a lot of people have had. The CoCo and a lot of older, a lot of the same era of computers, the video signal that they produce, is supposed to be NTSC compatible or even PAL compatible if you're in a PAL region. And there's kind of a funny thing there. We have the entire video screen or whatever is supposed to be composed of 2 frames. And each frame is supposed to be composed of a number of lines. That's actually there's a half a line in there, and so then the half line signal is used to interlace the 2 frames, so you get one screen from combining the 2 frames. That's the normal TV signal, but the computers kind of skip that, tended to, And so they don't use the half line thing, and they just produce non-interlaced video, which effectively makes them half the vertical resolution of a TV signal. Anyway, the way they do it is it worked just fine with the old analog receivers who just sort of, just kept resetting as if they were starting over each frame. But when you have these modern chips or whatever that are trying to implement the original spec, some of those don't account for the possibility that you might get this, just the first frame over and over again. And they don't necessarily decode that correctly. My point being is it can be difficult to get a video capture from a CoCo or from other old machines. And so Steve Strobridge, of course, is a YouTube personality trying to review CoCo games, has a certain amount of experience and expertise in dealing with this, and he's posted a link to a device on eBay that he says he uses that works pretty well for capturing stuff from the CoCo. So if you're looking to capture video from a CoCo, particularly if you want to turn it into YouTube video or whatever, you may want to check out this link and buy this item off of eBay. You guys ever have trouble like this?
I haven't done much video work. I do, pretty much all audio. So
I've done a little bit of video, and it's definitely good to hear about a device that's working well.
Yeah, it is a little odd, a little awkward to find. Sometimes you just get lucky. I think the first time I wanted to do it, I kind of got lucky, and so it's kind of weird the first time I hit something that didn't decode it. It was like, what am I doing wrong? So a lot of people may not be aware that that's a potential problem. So anyway, if you are having that kind of problem, you want to check out the link that Steve posted.
Yeah, it's very nice he did that. It helped some people out.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Steve.
All right. So the next link is a neat little device that somebody's put together. So it's from Tim Fadden. So here's a handy idea for desoldering chips. Easy to make out of 3/4 ridged copper pipe to fit any soldering iron. So let me describe. He's actually in this picture he's posted. It looks like you've actually got 2 soldering irons, but at the business end, the hot end of the soldering iron, they've got a little piece of copper pipe that they've put on there, and they sort of cut one section out of the pipe. So you end up, the pipe kind of gives you 2 long parallel heated objects that you can use. So if you want to desolder a chip, you can effectively apply heat to multiple pins on both sides of the chip at once. I've never used anything like this for desoldering chips. I know when you are desoldering chips, it can be very difficult to do, particularly to do and save the chip, which in the past maybe was less important when you could just replace them with another 25 or 40 cent chip. And nowadays, one method for desoldering chips that some people recommend is to cut all the pins off the chip, and then pull the body of the chip off and throw it away, and then desolder each pin individually. And that's fine when it's a 74 series logic chip that you can replace for next to nothing, at least for now. But when it's your when it's your SAM chip or your 6847, your VDG chip or something like that, those are still replaceable, but at some cost. And at some point in the future, they won't really be replaceable. So it might be nice to think if you do need to desolder a chip, at least maybe you can do it in a way that is a bit less destructive. So
then you could save them, put them away somewhere nice.
Yep.
Pretty clever rig he set up there.
Yeah, it's pretty clever. So, and in this case, he's using 2 soldering irons that might provide a little extra heat. So you put a big chunk of metal on the end of your soldering iron. It's if it's not a very powerful soldering iron, it may not be helpful because you may just dissipate too much heat to actually melt any solder. So
you could always use it for branding as well.
Yeah, that's true, especially if you're part of a fraternity or something.
Or you have a lot of cattle.
Yeah, that too. All right. So the next item is from John Mark Mobley is made available the Glenside CoCo 123 newsletter for the winter 2016 issue. So this is the newsletter from the Glenside Color Computer Club. Some cool stuff in there. If you want to keep up with club happenings or whatever, there's usually good write-ups, working up to CoCo Fest. There's usually some good pictorial stuff from CoCo Fest that shows up a little later in the year. It's a quarterly newsletter. Anyway, it's available now. You want to go and download it and check it out. Did you guys check out the newsletter?
Yeah, I mentioned to John that this was a particularly good version of it too, right before CoCo Fest as well. So good job, John Mark.
Yeah, definitely one of the better ones. It's excellent.
Cool. All right. Well, moving on. Interesting title for this one. Donkey Kong's Failing Liver. What the death of the CRT display technology means for classic arcade machines.
I'm going to plug my ears on this one. I don't want to hear it.
Yes, same here.
So it's an interesting article. It's pretty, probably most of the people listening to this podcast have already heard some of this sort of discussion about how video doesn't quite look the same on CRTs or on LCDs as it does on the old CRT displays. Nowadays everyone has LCDs or other flat screen technologies. They're certainly a lot lighter and more convenient, but they don't look exactly the same as what you get on a CRT. The gist of this article is, for playing arcade games, it kind of outlines the downsides of having to use a CRT or using an LCD or whatever. Talks about the possibility that at some point you'll get a bit of a cottage industry that'll grow up, maybe to refurbish some of these CRT bulbs or whatever, but it's not there yet, so we don't know if it's going to show up or not. Anyway, it's probably worth a read if you want to understand some of the concerns about display technology or whatever. And again, this is specifically about arcade machines, but a lot of what's there applies also to retro computers. Some of the technologies, things like, like using light guns, for example, or whatever, those are dependent on CRT technology. So if you want to play light gun games, you need a working CRT. Those may not be available in the future.
That and computers that have built-in CRTs. That's probably, even like the Vectrix or, the older TRS-80s, the Model 1, Model 3. The CoCo's lucky that it's got an external display, so it doesn't have as much of it. But anything with an integrated tube in it, you better grab them while the getting's good.
Yeah, that's true. I was buying new Vectrix tubes last year about this time. I don't know if they're still available or not. But, they're not making any more of them, that's for sure.
Yeah, the larger ones, I think, are what are going out fast. But yeah, they all will eventually. I got a couple of 12-inch CRTs, and maybe I should grab a few more.
Yeah.
Hang on to those CM8 monitors.
Yeah. Okay, so the next link is a YouTube video, Experiments with Your Computer Quick Flick, from someone named calling themselves Nostalgia Nerd. So you may remember a few shows back we announced where a company from the UK called Usborne Books that had produced a number of technology-related books back in the 80s or whatever had made some of them available for free downloads now. And so basically this video, someone walks through one of those titles, which is related to doing experiments, like with the, temperature sensors and that sort of stuff, and kind of walks through them and talks about it. I don't know. You may want to check it out and see if you can if you're interested in doing any of those kind of experiments with your retro computers, with your CoCo or whatever. Anyway, it's kind of a cool idea. you may be able to do something cool with your CoCo using one of those Usborne books. That's why the link is here. So check it out. You gonna do that, Neil? Build yourself a temperature sensor for your CoCo.
Hey, it's another great use for the CoCo.
All right. Moving on to the next link. This is just something I stumbled across, something on Redbubble, which I'm not really familiar with. But it appears to be a place you can buy a sticker from someone named Thomas E. Smith, who's his avatar picture is something about Socialist Labor Party, which kind of seems like a weird thing to have when you're trying to sell stuff on the internet. But it seems a little capitalistic to me. But
yeah, secret capitalist.
Yeah.
That can't be good for sales.
No, you wouldn't think so. Maybe this is one of those new libertarian socialists that I've been hearing about. Seems a little strange. Anyway, the sticker itself is kind of cool. It's kind of in the form of an old Radio Shack sticker with a kind of a black bars and a white center. But it says, "My other computer is a Radio Shack TRS-80 microcomputer system." It says you can get these stickers a couple of different sizes, from 3 inches by 3.4 inches up to 7.4 by 8.5 inches. So they're pretty sizable stickers. They probably cover the back of your laptop screen or whatever. They're in the $3 range for the small sticker, up to $12.50 for the big one. Anyway, kind of cool if you want a sticker for your skateboard or whatever. You may want to check that out. Help out the Socialist Labor Party or all right, moving on. Okay, here's a Gamma Sutra link to a post-mortem for the making of the Oregon Trail. So Gamma Sutra has a number of these videos that are post-mortems for classic games. So the programmers, the team involved with the old game will talk about some of the issues that they faced when they were programming a game and some of the decisions they made and whatnot, whatever. The Oregon Trail is more commonly associated with the Apple II, but a number of the people listening to the podcast are probably of the age where they may have played Oregon Trail in school or whatever. So I thought it might be interesting for the listeners to check it out. So anyway, if not, don't look at it. But if it sounds like something you might want to watch, you want to check it out. I haven't had a chance to review this video yet, but I'm kind of basing my recommendation on the quality of other Gamma Sutra postmortems. So check it out. I hope you enjoy it. All right, CoCo VGA mode demo. This is a link from Brendan Donahue. He's been working with Ed Snyder and Steve Spiller on a replacement for the 6847 video display generator that's in the CoCo 1 and 2. The device will replace that with a VGA output. And not satisfied with just a drop-in replacement, they've added some register settings so that you can have you can manipulate palettes and get some extra modes or whatever in there. It's kind of cool technology demo. He's posted a video. Brendan's going to talk about this topic at CoCo Fest. Just a little preview of what he's going to talk about at CoCo Fest. So,
yeah, I'm
anyway.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah, same here. This is a really cool product.
He had it there last year, and it's coming along. It's definitely got a place.
Yeah, I can imagine it's not easy designing that.
Yeah. All right. Well, again, you check it out or come to CoCo Fest and talk to Brendan directly. How about
come
that?
To CoCo Fest.
That's another reason to come to CoCo Fest.
All right. The next one is a link. It's a programmer's blog from Stuart Orchard, who I guess was an author of Dragon games back in the day. I'm not really that familiar with him. He seems to focus solely on Dragon. He has some other games that will work on the CoCo, but it's basically as far as I know, he doesn't bother to do anything about the keyboard. They just work, it works on the CoCo if you only use the joystick, that kind of thing. The keyboard doesn't really translate, but if you just use the joystick, the game will play fine because that's where the CoCo and the Dragon are exactly the same. So anyway, he's got a programmer's blog up here on a new project called Return of the Beast, and he's got a subtitle, The Making of a Game for the Dragon Computers, or Yet Another Way to Burn a Load of Time. So, he's got some cool stuff. He's got some 6809 assembly code here, and he's looking at different issues related to writing the game or whatever. I haven't had a chance to dig too deeply into what he's written here. I'm looking forward to having that chance, once I'm dead, I guess, but like in infinite time. But anyway, he talks about, he's got a blog archive, a link on scrolling, and I know the game that he's talking about here does some really cool scrolling, very smooth, whatever. Now we're talking about on a Dragon, so the equivalent of a CoCo 1 or 2. It's one thing to do scrolling on a CoCo 3 where the hardware is happy to help, but when you scroll on a CoCo 1 or 2 or a Dragon, it's pretty much all CPU. So it'd be cool to see what he's doing there and what kind of techniques he's using. So you may want to check it out.
That's awesome.
All right. So here's kind of a weird one. So friend of the show, Boise Pete.
The Heron.
Touch the Heron, the origin of our Heron pilgrimage. So Mr. Boise's trying to become Dr. Boise. He's taking some classes in college there, working towards a PhD, and one of his classes is on machine learning that he's taking this semester. And so he's posted a blog here. If you read his blog, he'll go into more detail than I can really tell you personally, but he's working on something called a recurrent neural network, which is a kind of a way to build a piece of software that is capable of doing a certain amount of learning. You feed it information, and it kind of can build up a database that it can use in later iterations of itself to kind of mimic the ability to learn. And so one of the ways you can use this type of software is you train it with textual input, and then you can have it later spit out textual output that kind of looks like legitimate writing. Now, for some definition of legitimate writing. And so Boise's been having a lot of fun with this and feeding it text coming from the archives of the CoCo multimedia mailing list. And so he gets output that comes out, and it does look like, the output does look like mailing list messages. And some of it actually, you'll see names pop out that are familiar from the CoCo list, and you'll see words like OS9 and CoCo and floppy disk or whatever that pop out. And once in a while it'll pop out a collection of text that for a few lines it'll kind of have you going like, I can almost see someone really writing this. So anyway, it's kind of a curiosity, kind of a neat thing. And it's sort of a way of combining new technology with an old computer hobby. So we're always looking for that sort of thing. So anyway, he's got a blog post up. We have a link in the show notes. You may want to take a look, and you can try it out. He's actually got a link where you can try out his text generator and see what it spits back at you.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating stuff, and it's quite entertaining to read the output. It's pretty humorous, and it's kind of like if you gave the CoCo list, if you got them all drunk and they just started spewing gibberish.
How about this? Here's one. I just clicked on it. It says from Nick M.A. at optusnet.com.au. So it's presented itself as being from Nick Morentis. Subject, CoCo, no killing. That's a little weird. But then, now remember, this is supposed to be coming from Nick Morentis, right? And so the head of the message says, okay, I get OS9.
Oh, man.
You can't really imagine Nick coming through with that one. It's kind of funny to imagine him saying that. What circumstances would that be? Kicked in the head by the local wildlife or something like that. Anyway, so kind of fun. It's a bit silly, but got to have some fun with life, right? All right, moving on. So Hugo DeFort, so one of Neil's Canadian pals, he's been working on a CoCo 3 game, and he's got a little YouTube demo showing it. Looking at the demo, it's hard to believe that it's not already completed. I mean, the graphics are beautiful. It's just amazing looking stuff.
It is gorgeous.
Anyway, the name of this program is called Baffle Bees. He has some kind of heroine protagonist. It's kind of a jump and run style game, a platform style game, if you like. And it's got some mean looking bees involved. Anyway, it looks like a cool game. It's well underway, and we're definitely looking forward to hearing more about this one, Hugo. I don't know if he's going to be at CoCo Fest or not. It'd probably be a bit of a trip for him. I think he's in Quebec, but he had mentioned he wanted to come. I don't know if he'll be coming or not. I hope so. That'd be cool.
Come on, Hugo. Come
on, Hugo. Let's go. Neil
that car.
Neil will pay for the poutine. Making a little fun of the Canadian cuisine there.
If that's the case, then I'll go to Quebec and pick him up.
All right. Okay, so this next one is a little vanity thing for me. So some of you may remember or may or may not be aware or whatever, but so there's something called Retro Challenge, which is a twice yearly event where we have old geeks get together and specify sort of their own projects, and then they work on their retro computing projects for a month, and then we kind of shape it up like it's a competition and declare winners and distribute prizes, that sort of thing. I've participated in this event a number of times myself, including the first time I participated was with the Farfall, which was declared one of the winners. Participated many times over the years, and then back in last September or so, the organizers said they were going to have trouble keeping it going for the event last October. So I volunteered to run the event back in October, and I'm still in charge of it. And so the next one is coming up for April. So RC 2017-04 is how we refer to it now, Retro Challenge event for the April of 2017. That event is open for entrance. We have a link in the show notes. It's pretty easy to find. Just go to retrochallenge.org. It should show up. And I'd like to get as many people involved as possible. Certainly want to have some CoCo projects there and demonstrate some stuff. And whether you're just cleaning out your CoCo room or organizing your CoCo disc collection or polishing up your immense collection of program pack files or, whatever else you're doing, go ahead and blog about it for a month. And it's a good excuse to keep going on your project. And it's a good excuse to finish your project so that you can say, I finished what I was doing for the month. And, so I'm running it. And, if I may show a little partialness to CoCo projects if you've got one in mind. We'll have a guest judge, Michael Mulhern from the Retro Computing Roundtable. He's a little partial to Apple stuff, so I have to balance him out as well. All right. So that's that news. One last piece of news. Those who've been around the CoCo community for a while may be aware of the fact that several years ago, Alan Huffman, who we mentioned earlier in the news segment, Alan did work at Microware, the company behind OS 9. And also, if you've read Boise's book, the CoCo Tandy's Underdog, I forget the exact subtitle now. Anyway.
It's the colorful history of Tandy's Underdog computer.
Exactly. If you've read that book, you should know that Microware also was responsible for doing the modifications to the CoCo ROMs between the CoCo 2 and the CoCo 3. So as part of that effort, Microware, Tandy provided Microware with a couple of prototype CoCo 3 machines that are believed to have prototype gimme video circuits composed of a combination of PALs and 74 series logic and whatever else. And so it's believed that these prototypes may contain the secrets to the supposed 256 color mode that may have once existed on the gimme, aside from the one that's specific to the NTSC, which I've done a YouTube video about. So Alan at some point was aware that these machines were being discarded at Microware, and I don't know if he negotiated for them or did a little dumpster diving or what, but one way or another he came up with them and showed up at a CoCo Fest a few years ago, and eventually custody of those prototype boards were transferred to Mark Marlette as kind of the resident hardware guru for the community. Mark's had them for a few years. He's had other projects and has not had a chance to do a lot of in-depth analysis on them. So now apparently the word has it that Eric Gavrilik, apparently I'm not saying it right. If I say it three different ways, I know I'm not saying it right, but maybe one of them's not wrong. Anyway, Eric has volunteered to try to take up the mantle of analyzing these prototypes, and presumably knowing that Eric's also interested in the MAME emulator, perhaps he'll provide an outlet for emulating the prototypes in MAME. Not so sure, but anyway, so custody of those prototypes boards are in the process of being transferred between Mark Marlette and Eric Gavrilik. Mark shared some pictures of the devices with us. They don't look like they'd be a joy to work with. They don't have boot ROMs, so I'm not sure where you're supposed to start with that. I guess you start with the CoCo 3 ROM. The backs of the boards have a lot of what I call flying wires, just mysterious wires just between different points on the on the board. There's chips on the board that are in sockets but installed in a way where some of the pins of the chips are purposely outside of the sockets and then with wires soldered to the chips. So these are kind of rough prototypes. It's not clear that you'll ever get anything useful out of them. I hope somebody does. We'll just have to see. Eric, I hope I hope you know what you're getting into.
That's going to be pretty rough without any ROMs. I mean, they may not resemble anything like the CoCo being prototypes.
Right. Well, so if they basically are CoCo 3s in drag, then a CoCo 3 boot ROM ought to work, right? But if they are something as some incremental step before a true CoCo 3, but yet different than a CoCo 2, then who knows what you need for those boot ROMs. So I don't know. We'll see, I guess.
It makes me wonder if the 256 color mode is in there somewhere.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, I'm kind of skeptical about that one anyway, but like I said, the NTSC 8-bit color mode does exist. We know how it works. We know that it works. And from the glimpses of hints that it might exist that we've seen for the 256 color mode, I'm not convinced that it's referring to anything other than the NTSC 8-bit color mode. But, who knows? Maybe it is. Maybe it's there. We can all hope. It'd be interesting. I'd like to be wrong. So, anyway.
It'll all be in the CoCo 4.
We'll do the CoCo 4. Well, what is a CoCo 4? Let's skip that discussion.
I thought we were just skipping to the CoCo 5.
Yeah, well, let's skip to the end of the news section and let's take a little break. We'll be back with some feedback in the rest of the show.
Computing is a lot of fun. However, you must know the rules of computing and obey them, or you will find it a very dangerous sport. A computer safety manual may be obtained from your local safety council, police department, Radio Shack Computer Center, or Radio Shack store. If you suspect a malfunction with your computer under conditions such as the unit has been dropped, thrown, or stepped on, the power cord is damaged, frayed, or glowing, the unit is exposed to rain, water, or mountain dew, do not attempt any further adjustment, as doing so may further damage your computer. Remember, there are no serviceable parts inside the unit. Back away slowly, move diagonally if possible, and avoid all direct eye contact with the unit. When you have reached a safe distance, contact a professional Radio Shack service technician. They will provide further instructions and may recommend protective clothing containing the unit with inert materials such as sand or vermiculite, creating an expedient shelter. For your own protection, be sure to follow all instructions provided in your computer's manual or by Radio Shack service technicians. Computing can be a pleasurable experience as long as you always remain alert. Don't be a clown or show off while computing. You are just inviting injury or death.
All right, welcome back. Now it's time for some feedback. We have a little feedback from L. Curtis Boyle talking about the Birkenberg bus adapter we discussed, or I discussed in the last episode. Curtis says, Chris did have some software that allowed you to use the B&B XT adapter to work with things other than a hard drive. He showed it working with a Logitech hand scanner at some of the Rainbow Fest back in the late 80s or early 90s. So, yeah, I kind of posited the idea that since it is really just a bus adapter, that you should be able to, with a certain amount of savvy and understanding of how it works, you should be able to take other ISA hardware and use the Birkenberg XT adapter to interface it to the CoCo. I think I mentioned earlier in the show that I might want to try to do that with the ISA card that implements Tandy Sound for PCs. I haven't got there yet, but hopefully that'll work out. It'll be kind of fun to see if we can make that work.
And if you want, I actually have a working Logitech hand scanner with an 8-bit ISA card.
Oh, yeah. Any idea how that works? Well, if we have any documentation of that, that might be fun too. Anyway.
Cool project.
We'll have to figure that out. All right, so moving on. This is from Carl Von Winkle. He says, I have a Virgin with Radio Shack sticker, CoCo 3. Should I do the upgrade to this system or purchase another CoCo 3 and keep this one Virgin? I think he's talking about a memory upgrade. So, Tandy really didn't produce any 512 CoCo 3s. They just were 128K CoCo 3s with the 512K upgrade pre-installed. So this one, I guess I'll toss this to my co-host. I told Carl that I thought that the value of a Virgin sticker or an unbroken sticker, you're talking about the service stickers on the CoCos, that I didn't think that was too valuable, and that it'd probably be better off in terms of having fun with the CoCo 3 and or in terms of reselling it with going ahead and upgrading it to 512K. But I don't know. What do you guys think?
I agree with you on that. The only thing that I think would make it more valuable if it was sealed in the box. That's a whole different story.
Yeah, a totally in the box one could be more valuable. And then, didn't we sell one of those at the auction last year at CoCo Fest?
That went pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I think having a complete in the original box with the original manuals and everything is probably the hot ticket item, and just having the factory seal on the bottom isn't a big deal.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people were creative back in the day too, putting that seal back on, so it might have been open too. Hard to know.
Yeah, or at least people might think that, so it doesn't add as much value to it. Yeah, like I say, you could use a hairdryer to kind of heat up the glue, and then like a razor knife or something to kind of lift the sticker, and then you could kind of put it back, and it's hard to tell that it had been done, depending on how well you executed it, I guess. So
maybe
anyway,
maybe we're not the best judges, because I think we discussed before, if we got one of those CoCo 2 kits, every one of us would assemble it.
Yeah, true.
So true.
It's definitely true. New inbox or sealed software or whatever. I had to open that as well, and maybe not if it was already available in the community or whatever, but probably even then, just go ahead and open it myself just to see the documentation and all that. So anyway,
and it feels like you're living in 1985 again.
Yeah, well, it smells like it. You can breathe the air, right? So, all right. Well, okay, that's our feedback section. A little short this month, but I think that'll do. We'd love to have your feedback in the future, talking about this or other episodes. Whether you want to ask questions, provide suggestions, or just tell us how much you hate it when we do this or that, or how much you love it when we do that or the other thing. So, again, send us an email. It's feedback@cococrew.org or one of the other email addresses we discussed earlier. And, we'll try to mention your suggestion or feedback on the air and see what people think of it. All right. Well, thanks for listening, and we'll be back in just a minute with the rest of the show.
Here's a color computer monitor bargain from your nearby Radio Shack. Save $50 on our exclusive Tandy CM8 RGB analog color monitor. Only $249.95 during this sale. It's designed specifically for the Color Computer 3. It's a perfect complement to the superb graphics capabilities of the Color Computer 3 and produces sharp, crisp text and dazzling graphs and illustrations. The sale price Tandy CM8 color monitor, only at Radio Shack, a Tandy company.
All right, and we're back. This is our host discussion segment. So this month, our discussion is going to talk a bit about, or expand a bit about, a little conflict that flared up this month. When Mark Marlette became aware of someone in the community, someone from the Brazilian group, producing a product that, first, one that very closely mimicked a product that Mark Marlette's been producing for years called a protector, which is kind of a buffer for the CoCo bus to protect the 6009 processor if you short something out on the bus or whatever. And he wasn't real happy about that one, but then when he got to looking, it turns out that they'd also had someone else that also, or maybe it was the same person, had also produced a copy of the Triad 512K board. We say a copy, it's not necessarily a trace for trace kind of copy. It was not necessarily 100% identical. But so in the case of the protector, they definitely look very similar. They used the same chips. The chips were basically in the same place. The board was about the same, shape or whatever. Now, granted, the board was kind of rectangular. And, once you pick the same chips, they sometimes layouts suggest themselves. But anyway, I don't think the protector was really what bothered Mark so much. The Triad memory board, though, it does have a somewhat distinctive shape. It's cut in the shape of a triangle. Which is, again, maybe, it's not like it's cut in the shape of a French curve or anything, but still, it's a little bit unusual to see a board cut that way. And either way, it kind of emphasizes the fact that people are kind of taking some ideas from Mark and reproducing them. And so understandably, Mark was a little hot about that. And I'm not exactly sure where it stands, but I know he was talking about perhaps refusing to do business with certain individuals involved in the dispute from now on. So this kind of has come up from time to time here on the podcast. We're all here kind of, some of us want to do projects, some of us want to do software projects, some of us want to do hardware projects, but in some ways, some of the project ideas are more obvious than others. And so sometimes we're going to want to work on projects that are similar or even identical to projects other people have done. And so how do we avoid, when that happens, how do we avoid stepping on each other's toes and making each other angry? So with that introduction to kind of the situation, I'm going to try to toss it to my co-host to pull this discussion along, and maybe I'll try to jump back in a little later. So, guys, what do you think?
Well, I think, first of all, if you're going to have a product that's similar, you should at least try to contact the original publisher or person who created it, to even just get their opinion or approval.
I definitely agree. I think that has more to do with it than anything, is that if you're going to make a product that's almost identical to a product that already exists, you should probably reach out to the original creator to see if you're stepping on their toes. I know in the case of the products we're talking about, one of them was called the Protector, which is just like the original Protector, and then the triangle-shaped memory was called Trinity versus the original, which is called Triad. And I think it's pretty blatant. I don't think there's a lot of room for that was copied there.
Yeah, even the names are the same, are very close.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, it would have gone a long way to kind of reach out and say, we're producing this similar, or identical purpose, at least, device. And, just want to let you know, in the defense, on the other side, these are products that are being produced for the Brazilian market. Shipping to Brazil can be expensive, and I think there's a lot of import duties and that sort of stuff. And so you can understand the motivation for wanting these products and wanting to produce them kind of in country or whatever. Because otherwise you take an already kind of expensive hobby and make it a lot more expensive. Whereas, of course, the counter to that is well, if you'd maybe just brought that up, it's not expensive to have courtesy.
Especially in a case like this where they're in Brazil, and if you're dealing with a company like Cloud9 in the USA, I'm sure they wouldn't mind, because it's not really stepping on anybody's toes. I mean, especially being that far apart.
Yeah, and actually, it could have resulted in a better relationship of having the products produced down there in addition to the U.S. Whereas now it's kind of like, well, I'm not going to send anything down there because you'll just copy it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think the perspective or the attitude or whatever towards intellectual property between, say, the United States and Brazil, I think there's a definite difference there. There's a cultural divide. I don't really think that there was ill intent, so to speak. I don't think Victor or whatever was rubbing his hands together and laughing about how he was screwing Mark out of the money or whatever. I think he just wanted to produce something and make the world a better place. So I don't think, I think he probably also kind of thought, well, what's the big deal? It costs us a lot of money. We're going to save some. I don't know. I want us to all be friends here. and so I don't want to see any of us as particularly bad guys. It's just kind of a shame that we've got the one group that's kind of stepped on the toes of someone who's been in the community a long time and making things for the community. If they had known that this was going to be a point of contention, I think it would have been very easy for the people involved to say, hey, Mark, we're going to do this, or we'd like to do this. What do you think? And he probably would have said, well, it's no big deal, produce your own stuff or whatever. Or maybe he could have made a deal, say, well, maybe you could cut me in on this a little bit and I can make life easier for you this other way. and share some points about the design or whatever. I'm not sure. And it's just kind of unfortunate that the misunderstanding kind of got out of hand and resulted in some hurt feelings.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I hope that this will get smoothed over and will resolve itself in a good way.
Says, yeah, you definitely don't want to cause any of these problems.
Okay, so what do you think the answer is going forward to kind of to limit this sort of unpleasantness in the future?
Oh, well, I think the answer comes down to communication.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, so I know for one thing, the Brazilian guys have their Facebook group, the Club of Color Brazil. The primary language on that group is Portuguese, of course. I am a member. I can't read all of it, but quite often, there's pictures or whatever. You can kind of figure out, even without being able to read Portuguese, you can kind of at least figure out what they're talking about based on the pictures or a few keywords. I know now Boise and Mark, I think, have become members of the group. So maybe at least now, if things are going on, maybe they'll see some stuff there. Maybe we can encourage the Brazilian guys also to cross post out to the English language color computer group and kind of share what projects they're working on there. That might get things communicated a little broader, a little wider before they get out of hand. I think that'd probably be a good practice.
Yeah, and we definitely have to realize that we have a language barrier and a culture barrier. And sometimes when those clash, that's how some of these things have to work themselves out.
Yeah. Well, like I said, in general, the Brazilian guys have been a big asset to the community, just in terms of energy. They've done some cool stuff and brought some cool input from time to time. They've seen some cool articles in Portuguese, some of which could be translated or whatever. I've seen some cool projects from those guys. So I definitely don't want them to be isolated from the group as a whole, so that we can maybe smooth all this over and kind of pick it up from here and try to avoid kind of this unpleasant level of conflict in the future.
Yeah, so. I think what we've seen is that when there's collaboration, we've seen good things happen.
Yeah. Well, and so, for example, I mean, I know Mark and has had good collaboration on his Super Spectro board with Luis Antoniosi. Is that who he's partnering with there?
Yes. Yeah. Perfect example.
Yeah. So those guys are getting along fine. So I think that's a good model for the future, is to work together on some projects and, like I said, make the best of it. All right. Well, so I guess it just comes down to communicate, tell people what you're doing, try to be cognizant or aware that if there's other projects out there that kind of cross the same ground, that depending on how you take your project, there could be some hurt feelings. So try to reach out and talk to those people and kind of try to get everyone on the same page. And because, the group is only so big, we don't need to split it up unnaturally. So, cool. Well, CoCo forever then, huh? Okay, well, I guess that brings this discussion to a close. So we're going to take another break, and we'll have the rest of our show, including an interesting interview with the head of Modern Day Tandy. So stay tuned.
Okay, but why Tandy computers? In a word, quality. We do it all, from custom-designed semiconductors to the finished product. Tandy business computers are manufactured in our own USA plants. We test and retest and test again to ensure one of the highest standards of quality in the industry. And Radio Shack provides total service and support. I'm convinced.
Tandy Computers at Radio Shack Computer Centers. In business for business.
Okay, welcome back, Coconuts. We've got a real treat for you this month. We've got an interview with Mr. Darren Grant, who is, I hope I'm saying this right, the CEO of Tandy Corporation. Is that just for the UK or is that worldwide, Darren?
Well, we're obviously based in the UK, but we do operate worldwide, yeah. Awesome.
And so Darren is going to join us and give us some insider's report on the state of Tandy today and how they're trying to bring Tandy back as a big player in the computing world, or exactly whatever his plans are, and maybe give us some insight into who knows what. I'll try not to make too much of a hash of this, but welcome, Darren. We're happy to have you. And so maybe just to start us out, you could give us some information about how you got involved with Tandy and what Tandy's up to today.
Okay, sure. Well, thanks for having me anyway. Well, essentially, I originally joined the original Tandy Corporation, which you guys would know as Radio Shack, in the UK arm of that in the mid-1980s. And as the old Remington ad said, I enjoyed it so much that I bought the company. So essentially, basically, I started in one of the local stores because we had Tandy stores, which were essentially the same as Radio Shack, but using the Tandy name here in the UK and Europe. I joined while I was still studying as a part-time position. When I finished my studies, I joined full-time, and then I moved on after a few years, and then basically various things happened where the UK Tandy operation was sold to the mobile phone operator Carphone Warehouse, and then basically they converted most of the Tandy stores into Carphone Warehouse outlets, and stopped using the Tandy brand as a retail brand in the UK. And that's when basically I came along and approached Radio Shack, who still owned all the rights to the Tandy branding, and basically took on the remains of the UK Tandy company and acquired all the trademark rights and so on from Radio Shack.
Awesome. So that sounds not unlike what's happened more recently with the Radio Shack here in the U.S., where they kind of got bought up by a cellular provider, or turned into more of a cell phone store. Although they're still kind of hanging on as sort of a half Radio Shack and half Sprint stores these days. Can you enlighten us a little bit on what those arrangements are, or you probably know a lot more about it than most of us do?
Sure. Well, essentially, as you know, Radio Shack went into Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection, and one of their largest creditors was a company called Standard General, and they basically bought around about 1,700 stores and the rights to the Radio Shack name, and they now operate they created a new corporation called, escapes me now, General Wireless Operations Incorporated, and they now operate the Radio Shack stores in the United States. And because they're also, I believe, an investor in Sprint, they made an arrangement with Sprint to co-brand the stores, basically to reduce their overheads by having two businesses operating out of the same space.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Well, that's cool. I kind of had the impression that Sprint had somehow bought Radio Shack.
Yeah, sure. And I guess a lot of people would probably think that because Sprint is the primary brand. When you go to these stores, the more prominent brand is the Sprint brand.
Yeah. Well, so I'm lucky enough to still have a Radio Shack in close proximity to my home, and kind of watch the demise or whatever. But if you go in there now, at least the Radio Shack side doesn't look too bad compared to, it doesn't look like it's completely gone. They seem, I have no idea overall, but they seem reasonably healthy. And I noticed they even have some Tandy branded merchandise in there these days, mice and keyboards and such. What do you think about that?
Sure. Yeah. It's interesting actually that the new owners of Radio Shack have realized that one of the problems that Radio Shack had was that traditionally they sold a range of rather unique products with their own branding on. I'm sure you're familiar with brands such as NSL batteries and the realistic audio equipment and so on. And but they moved away from that and started selling primarily mobile phone accessories and phones and call contracts and so on. And basically they were doing essentially the same thing that everybody else was doing, only their competitors were, large corporations like Walmart, for example. And if you're selling the same products as Walmart, there's no way you can compete with your small local neighborhood store compared to some giant warehouse. And so they've basically decided that they're trying to return to, the best parts of the business model before they took that wrong turn. So they're reintroducing the realistic brands, and in association with us at the moment, they're experimenting with returning the Tandy brand in computer products.
It's certainly been pleasant to see the Tandy branded microcontroller and more hardware oriented things in the Radio Shack stores that I've been in. The ones near me have closed, but I recently had the opportunity to stop in at some, and it was neat to see the Tandy brand again.
Over here, we don't really do a great deal in the computer line of products. We're much more concentrated on the DIY and maker products. So we do a range of electronic kits and components and things like that.
I see you have some Raspberry Pi products. Is that true?
That's right, yeah. We have a kit which is an expansion board with analog to digital conversion and various I/O facilities on it.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so in a sense, I think that's probably more true to the Tandy brand in many ways, at least the beginnings of the Tandy brand, than something prepackaged or whatever. Definitely it was a spirit of experimentation and hands-on building things or whatever back in the day. And in fact, we often joke about, even now, when you go to a retro computing thing, you find a Tandy computer. The Tandy ones, the CoCos and the Model 1s and 3s and that sort of stuff, more often than not, they don't have any screws in the cases, so you can get inside. And more often than not, they've got a few wires hanging off of them that you have to figure out, well, what was this added to do? So I think that's keeping the spirit of the brand just right about where it should be, dealing with the maker-oriented products. I think that's really cool.
Sure. I mean, it's interesting actually that Charles Tandy originally saw electronics as another hobby product line. I'm sure you're all aware that Tandy was originally a leather goods company, and it was the hobbyist market that they were interested in when they started going into electronics. Charles Tandy saw it just as another hobby activity, which would complement the leather hobby products that they sold.
It must have been an interesting guy to hang out with.
Sure, yeah. Unfortunately, I never got the opportunity to meet him.
Yeah. I mean, everyone sits around making a belt and then say, to go along with this belt, I'd really like a transistor radio.
Well, I guess it's the thinking was that, the Tandy Leathercrafts movement really started because Charles Tandy saw that there were all these ex-servicemen that basically wanted something to do with themselves once they came out of service. So I guess, the same kind of reasoning would be that these guys, a lot of them would have been in the Navy or whatever, would have had exposure to technology and would be interested in building and maintaining circuits and radios and things like that.
Well, that's exactly my father's story. He was in the Army, not the Navy, but just the same idea. He got some pretty technical training on, fixing radios and that sort of thing, and carried it out into a hobby for him, and brought him into the Radio Shack stores and for CB radios and whatever else. And I'm pretty sure that's the exposure that eventually got him to buy a Tandy computer for me as a child.
Right.
And so yeah, well, I mean, I think, I think definitely the listenership of this podcast is definitely full of people with stories like that. People whose, their own technical interests or their technical interests of their friends or family got them into the Radio Shack stores, and the Tandy computers were their first computers, and they learned a lot from them. And in some ways, I don't know, I just feel like a lot of the Tandy computer fans from the past tend to be a more sort of technical-oriented crowd, whereas, if your first computer was a VIC-20, you probably wanted to just play games. But, if your first computer was a Tandy, CoCo or one of the others, you probably were interested in sort of a different set of things. I mean, we all like to play games too, but we wanted to learn how to program or maybe even beyond that, doing hardware add-ons or whatever. But so, yeah.
I think that actually that kind of era, the late 70s through the 80s and early 90s, computer ownership was really more people who were technically inclined. And in those days, someone could learn about how the computer worked and write their own software easily or make modifications to the computer. Effectively, one person could understand how the system worked without having to have a degree in higher mathematics or something like that. Whereas a modern computer, effectively, you just have a number of chips that do a specific purpose, like a graphics controller chip, and you really have no idea what's going on inside it.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
I guess I feel kind of fortunate to have grown up during that era myself, and gained a technical understanding of things, which I don't believe is as easy today with modern technology.
Right. I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, it's just true. It's drinking from a fire hose.
Speaking of someone who's employed at an operating system provider and dealing with modern machines that you can buy today, I guarantee you that the number of people who truly understand even large portions of the computers, much less the whole things, is, count on one hand, and maybe that's if you're making a fist. There's not many people who really understand how everything works. And it's hard enough to be an expert on even the small pieces of those, like networking controllers or graphic controllers or whatever. So it is much different in some sense. But, the market's responded to some degree, with the Arduino and even beyond that to like Raspberry Pi and that style of machine. You've reduced them to building blocks that then could be still created and innovated on top of. So yeah, I think that's a good piece of the market to be looking at. So with that said, what kind of plans do you have for extending the Tandy brand? Are you going farther that direction? Are there any other plans that you'd like to share?
Well, essentially, our focus is primarily on the hobbyist and maker product lines at the moment. It's too early to say what will happen with Radio Shack in the United States. We're still negotiating with them as to what they want to do in terms of whether they want to continue to use the Tandy brand in the Radio Shack stores and what their intentions are, and so on. So really all I can talk about at the moment is that the maker kind of products are the main things that we're focusing on, and not just kind of the Arduino and Raspberry Pi type things, but more fundamental electronics, where you're playing with transistors and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not one to criticize the likes of the Arduino, because I think it introduces a great deal of people to something that they otherwise wouldn't understand. If they have to start learning electronics theory from day one, that's enough to put anyone off. But I personally enjoyed the building circuits with a soldering iron from the individual components when I was growing up. And so I guess that's something that I want to try and recreate for our customers as well.
Well, that's awesome. So do you see yourself then, maybe this is a touchy subject, but are you hoping to stay tightly aligned with Radio Shack, or are you reaching out to be a more independent brand? And is it different in the United States versus in other parts of the world?
Yeah, sure. In the United States and the rest of the world, it is very different. Our focus is entirely on the maker products. In the rest of the world, the Radio Shack thing is difficult to call at the moment, because the arrangement with them is that they're using the Tandy brand on products which they've specified and had manufactured for them, rather than us having any involvement in the manufacture of those products. So, I can't really speak for what their future intentions are at the moment, I'm afraid.
I'm curious whether we live in an internet world now, and as I said, many of us don't have a Radio Shack nearby anymore. Neil lives in Canada. I don't think they have any in Canada anymore. And is there an internet? Do you have like direct access to your products, or do you strictly go through distributors? How would we find out about your products?
Sure. Well, basically, if you want to order, anyone can order on our main e-commerce website, which is tandyonline.co.uk. We do have a few distributors, but they tend to just be small independent stores that in the US, for example, there are a few of the former Radio Shack franchisees who, when Radio Shack went into the bankruptcy protection, they dropped the Radio Shack name but wanted to carry on, carrying some of the products because we use the same product codes essentially. So if you're looking for a particular component that you used to pick up at a Radio Shack, then we may well have the same product.
That's great.
You mean like the same product codes, like 26 dash?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, obviously the 26 series I think is the computer series, but say a packet of control knobs to go on a potentiometer. It's a bit of a mouthful, that word, isn't it? The exact same product code for a pack of 4 control knobs that you used to buy in Radio Shack, you'll find on our website as well.
That's great.
That's awesome.
That's really cool.
That's definitely cool. So Darren, I think you mentioned offline that you personally have at least some interest in retro computing. Is that true?
Yeah, to a certain extent. Like I say, I consider myself fortunate having grown up in a time when we had these relatively simple computers where you could understand how they worked. And so, yeah, I still have a Tandy 102 portable computer. Doesn't get much use, of course, because modern computers are so much more powerful, but that doesn't mean to say that it's still not something that you keep and get out every now and again and just have a play and remember what things used to be like.
Absolutely.
Yeah, cool.
We used to use these Tandy 102s for stock taking in the stores. It's quite a manual process in those days. We literally typing in all the product codes, going through, and you don't have 30 packets of a 1K ohm resistor or something, and so you'd spend hours going through every value of resistor.
Yeah.
All right.
I know. I believe John, you worked at a Radio Shack store, didn't you? And
yeah.
I did as well. So we've lived that before too.
Yeah. In fact, that reminds me. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't break their news for them, but I hear a rumor that the Glenside Color Computer Club, the sponsors of CoCo Fest, may be taking custody of a Tandy 2000 computer, which in the U.S. The Radio Shack stores at one point used these Tandy 2000s as the backroom computer that would keep track of stock, and it would run the point of sale terminals at the front desk of the store or whatever. And so they, I'm not sure what's the details are there, but anybody who's interested in seeing that, that might be one more bonus to going to CoCo Fest this year. You'll be able to see one of those machines set up. Anyway, we're mentioning CoCo Fest there, and Darren, is there any chance that we could get you out to the Chicago area to come and visit us at CoCo Fest?
Well, I would love to come, but this particular one is a bit too short notice, unfortunately. But perhaps in a future event when you're having it again.
Yeah. Well, definitely. CoCo Fest will be every year. They still show signs of kicking for the foreseeable future.
Lovely to have you.
So, I think I may have mentioned to you before that this group here has been working on a second event that we're targeting in October in Chillicothe, Ohio. Now, here's the tender spot here. We may have to edit this part depending on the reaction. I'm going to share the name that we've been working with. Now, keep in mind that we picked this name over a year ago before we knew anybody was picking up the Tandy brand. We're calling it Tandy Assembly. And that's a retro computing event that targets all of the Tandy computers, the color computer, the models 1, 3, and 2, pocket computer, the Tandy 1000, whatever else. So we're hoping to make a nice big event out of that. And we're also hoping we don't have to change the name now. But don't want to put you on the spot, but...
No, that's not a problem. I think anyone who goes after their enthusiastic user groups in terms of business is crazy. But you see it all the time. I don't understand that mentality really, but there you go. Nobody's claiming to be the company that they're fans of, but somehow their lawyers seem to get the wrong end of the stick and get upset about it.
Yeah, well, I definitely will assure you that no one wants Tandy to be a success in the world marketplace more than we do. We love Tandy. I know I have a very successful career based on knowledge that I acquired from having owned a Tandy computer. I really do credit it with much of my success in life, and I suspect my co-hosts probably have similar feelings, and certainly a lot of our listeners, I'm sure, will feel the same way. So we definitely do not want to do anything to besmirch the Tandy name or the Tandy brand. So anyway, we also would love to have you join us in October if that's at all in your travel plans. I know Chillicothe, Ohio is probably not tops of the tourism lists for the average person in the UK, but I assure you it is a nice place. It's a little rural. But if you would consider coming out, I'd love for you to put some thought to that, and we could probably even get you a speaking opportunity or whatever else you might enjoy as part of that event.
Sure. Well, send me the details and I'll check it out.
Awesome. Well, so Mike's in charge of that. So.
Yeah, we'll get the information to you for sure.
Okay, good.
Excellent.
Well, so what else, fellas?
Oh, I'm kind of interested in hearing about, growing up, what your experience was. How did you get into computers and electronics?
Okay. Well, funnily enough, my first exposure to Tandy was when I got a book on electronics out of the library, and my mum took me to the local Tandy store to buy the components that were listed in the book so that I could build the projects in the book. But that's kind of really where my interest in electronics started, with that book, which the key project was making a radio that would fit into a Tic Tac box.
Oh, so very cool.
Small pocket size thing.
Oh, neat.
So I thought that was really cool. The downside of it was an AM radio that needed 40 meters of wire running from it to work as an aerial.
Right, the antenna, yeah.
So kind of spoiled the portability aspect of it. But yeah, then I studied electronic engineering at college, and as I mentioned already, I started working in the Tandy store while I was studying. My original idea was to become an electronics engineer, but really, in terms of career move, that wasn't the best thing at the time because electronics was moving to the Far East. So, any major employer in the electronics industry was disappearing from the UK and setting up in Asia. So I didn't pursue that. I ended up working in a software startup company who ended up getting bought out by IBM. So I've kind of been in the tech industry for, well, all my career, really.
Well, that sounds cool. Well, so do you have any comments on how the Tandy line of computers fared in the UK versus the likes of the Sinclair or the BBC Micro?
Sure. Yeah. Unfortunately, they really didn't take off at all. Of course, I guess one of the key reasons was the cost. The Sinclair Spectrum was half the price of a CoCo, and the software never really came with the machines. While in Radio Shack stores you had a fair selection, and you had the Rainbow magazine and so on, which you could order games and software from direct from people who are producing those. Here in the UK, really, that kind of community didn't spring up around the Tandy computers. In fact, unfortunately, in the Tandy stores, we effectively stopped selling them so that we would sell the Sinclair and Commodore systems instead for the home computers. We still sold the PCs and the Tandy 1000 and so on, and they did reasonably okay. But I think part of the problem was that because these products were coming direct from Fort Worth in Texas, the exchange rates weren't terribly favorable, and that made them uncompetitive compared to PCs made by Japanese manufacturers and so on.
Sure, I can see that.
It's unfortunate, but since seeing your Facebook group, the CoCo Facebook group, I've been on the lookout for a CoCo, and they seem increasingly difficult to find. Occasionally one comes up on eBay, but you see hundreds of them on eBay in the United States, but very few appear in the UK.
Yeah, I had reason to. I wanted a PAL video CoCo for a project I was working on, and it took me a while to be able to acquire one. So yeah, they don't seem to have been anywhere near as popular. I guess, and of course, especially in the case of the CoCo, you had to compete against the Dragon, which was essentially the same design. Slightly
the Dragon
set of hardware.
The Dragon was kind of also a very small market segment. Really, basically, there were two camps at school. Almost three. You either had a Commodore 64 or a Sinclair Spectrum for the majority of kids, or if your parents were a little bit more wealthy and wanted a computer that was compatible with the school's computers, then you might be lucky enough to have a BBC Micro with a floppy disk drive.
Yeah.
The Dragon really was kind of, short-lived, really. I don't think very many people would even heard of it, to be fair.
I just got a question for you. What retro computer today are you most involved with?
I wouldn't say I'm involved with any particular retro computer. Too busy doing all the things that are involved in running Tandy, really.
Yeah, that's true. That's be a lot of work right there.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, so we mentioned the BBC Micro a little bit. I know back in the 80s, the computer literacy was a big push from the UK government. I know as I was growing up here, in that's roughly that same time frame, I felt like everybody I knew had some sort of computer or access to one at school and was learning to program in BASIC or whatever. And I really believe that by the time we all became adults, that, people would sit around and converse about writing computer programs, and it just would be a natural skill for everyone to have. And it didn't quite play out that way. Instead, computers are treated kind of like cars where, maybe you know to go and get the oil change, but most people don't know much more than that about them. Is it like that in the UK as well? Is there any long-lasting effects of the computer literacy drive from back in the 80s there?
I think, yeah. I mean, the computer literacy drive, I think, was quite successful, really. There's quite a few people in the technology industry that got their start by programming BASIC on an 8-bit computer.
Sure.
I think what happened, though, is towards the end of the 80s, the Microsoft effect happened, where basically because Microsoft Windows and Office were the standard tools being used in any kind of workplace, that schools then switched to, rather than teaching how computers work, teaching people how to use the tools that they'll find in the workplace.
Right.
And that really, as the Raspberry Pi project would tell you, meant that now, today, there are very few people that want to study computer science and get into tech industries because they don't have that kind of insight into the workings of computers that they would have learnt at school. So, in fact, that was one of the reasons for the Raspberry Pi project, is that they recognized that actually there needs to be a way for kids to get back into understanding a computer. And, your parents' £1,000 laptop is not something you want your kid messing with, but you can give them a $30 computer thing to play with and blow up as much as they like, and it's no big loss. And I think that's a really good aim of the Raspberry Pi Foundation, to reintroduce people into experimenting with things, really.
Yes, definitely. The computer shifted to becoming another appliance.
Yeah, and you can understand that to a certain extent. Going back to the 1980s, you had to be willing to learn or have some kind of technical understanding in order to own and get, a good results out of using a computer. But then, as computer technology became easier and more powerful, the user was abstracted further away from how the system worked, which meant that ordinary people could use it without any real technical knowledge. And so you have a wider audience, but you're kind of losing the core group of people who have an interest in computer technology as well, because you're not providing the educational facilities for those people.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. I wonder, is there a difference just in the world, the environment that kids grow up in? I know my own children, I mean, they use computers and, they love to play games on them on the phone or whatever, but, they really have never quite got that same spark of interest. When I first saw a computer and I figured out I could change what it was putting out on the television screen, that was amazing to me. And to my kids, that's a so what, and then a walk away kind of moment. I wonder, how do we get that drive to come back to children to want to learn? I mean, like you say, if you can put the Raspberry Pi or something like that in their hands, and that'll get some of them. I wonder, is that enough? Is there more we need to do to build that spark?
Sure. I guess it applies to any technology. If you look at the history of the motor car, there was a time where people, perhaps through necessity, but perhaps through interest, knew how to fix things on their car. And now today, very few people do that. Again, partly because understanding the complex systems that maintain the car now is a lot more difficult than an old car. But you don't see very many young people at school saying they want to be a motor engineer or anything like that either. And I think it's just because the technologies have matured to the point where people just see them as tools that they use and dispose of, rather than something that's fascinating to them because it's kind of an everyday object. I guess a computer in the 80s was a fascinating object, and a new car in the 1950s was a fascinating object. People wonder, how does the carburetor work? What's so cool about this new car? How come it's, able to get me so much higher performance than the previous car I had? Those kind of things just aren't, exciting anymore.
Yes, it's true. And I think all retro computing interest really beckons back to that sense of discovery that we all had when we first found out that we could do these things, whether it was building a radio from a kit or, learning to program a computer, that we kind of established an emotional bond to that. And, that's still with us today, all these years later.
I think the other thing is, too, with a lot of technologies such as cars and computers, is it's more of a closed world. Like if you take Apple computers, they don't even want you going in them. I mean, you can't change nothing. And same with a lot of the new cars now. You can't even see the engine in them. They got a cover over them. They want you to take them to the dealer. So that doesn't help.
No, definitely not. I guess that's a sign of the sort of consumerist society that we've created, where we just basically just use something and pay somebody to provide it. I mean, it's not so common here in the UK, but I understand in the United States, a lot of people lease their cars, so the maintenance of their car is all in for a monthly fee. So they don't really care about how to maintain it or how it works, because the guy at the garage is going to fix everything for you.
Yeah, that's true.
And as you said earlier, it's just an end result of all the growing complexity. Things become more and more complex, and we just don't have the time or the availability of the tools when the complexity just spins out of control.
Sure, yeah, and with cars, you can see that's like the environmental issues and fuel economy and so on needs complicated computer control, which is far more difficult for someone to understand anyway.
But all the more reason we need complicated computer programmers.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Where do we get the next generation? I mean, we're not exactly old, but we're all aging. And so when we all retire and stop working in tech industries, where does the next generation come from? There's only so many iPhone apps that the world needs. There are real applications that people need as well, and that requires more than being able to write a few lines of JavaScript to make pretty patterns happen on an iPhone.
Oh, well, well, let's hope we find a way. Definitely think the products that are coming out from the Tandy brand, the maker-oriented stuff, is a good start. And I hope those are very successful for you and lead to an even larger line of them with an equally eager to learn following as Tandy has enjoyed in the past.
Sure, and I think the Raspberry Pi has demonstrated that there is kind of a resurgence of interest in hands-on activities. You also see people using film to take photos with, because there's kind of a tactile experience. So, there's less interest than there used to be, but, I still think there's hope for people who, really want to do things that are hands-on.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Coming back, you see it even with the vinyl records, too. That's kind of neat to see.
And cassettes. You see music on cassettes these days.
That's right.
Yeah. I remember throwing out cassettes to buy CDs because they were the latest thing, and kind of again that was an amazing thing. The whole idea of a laser disc, a disc that was read by a laser, was incredible in those days. These days, actually, young people probably haven't even seen a CD player.
Yeah,
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Well, Darren, what have we not asked you? What secret information do you hold that we'd like to know about?
Well, I wish I had some great secret I could share with you, but unfortunately, I don't.
Let's see. Have you been? Have you been to the Tandy archives there in Texas? I think you said something about wanting to go and visit them.
Sure. No, I haven't been there yet. But I got the library there to send me a list of the items that they have. It looks like a fascinating archive. It's mostly promotional photos and scrapbooks that were kept by the executives of the Tandy Corporation in Fort Worth. But nevertheless, it would be interesting to see.
Yeah. For some reason, it's been very difficult to pin down accurate sales figures for, particularly for the Tandy color computer, and maybe for some other of Tandy's computers. It seems like there was some sort of gentleman's agreement between, those that would have been in the know back in the day, and even the ones we've been able to reach and talk to still seem to be holding to it. So if you ever do get to the archives and you come across a source that actually gives those numbers, please let us know. Keep us in mind, and we'd love to be able to publish accurate numbers on how many CoCos were released and or not released but sold, and that sort of thing.
I think that there is actually something that would be more interesting than those archives. Is I believe that a lot of documentation that was not considered necessary anymore was disposed of when those archives were sent to the library. But the General Wireless Operations, who took over the Radio Shack stores, they also inherited the Fort Worth head office building and some warehouse space, which would have archives in. And as part of the agreement, when they went through the auction process to buy the remains of the Radio Shack, they said that they would give the archives to an institution. They didn't name the institution, but those archives would probably have more useful information in, because, well, for two reasons, really. One, the current Radio Shack Corporation is probably not particularly concerned about the sensitivity of information like how many color computers were sold.
Right.
And secondly, because those are the ones that would have been held back from going into the library archives. So anything that would have been sensitive to the original corporation probably would be in that collection.
Interesting.
So, yeah, somebody maybe want to follow it up with the General Wireless Operations and find out if they have made any arrangements for those archives to be sent to an institution, and what the institution is.
Cool. Well, that's a good piece of information. Somebody should jot that down. And we do have historians in the group that might take some interest in that. So we'll see.
I guess it probably is a bit difficult for them to find an institution that has the space to take it, because obviously it's a commitment for them that they've got to have the costs of the space to store those things. So it may just be that they haven't found anyone who's interested enough in order to take the archives. I kind of hope that they might have gone to the Fort Worth Library with the first selection And that may still happen, I guess.
Sure. Cool.
I know the Fort Worth Library are very interested in local history. You know, they've got quite a large collection of anything that is related to local history of Fort Worth in Texas.
Yeah. Well, we should keep our eyes open for that and see if we can catch any wind of those extra archive materials.
It sounds like we need to schedule a visit to the Fort Worth Library for sure.
Field trip in the works.
There you go.
The Assembly Field Trip 2018.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Maybe so. All right, guys. What else?
I'm coming up blank.
Okay. Well, Darren, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. I hope we'll be able to convince you to come out and join us at Tandy Assembly in Chillicothe, Ohio in October, and or CoCo Fest next year, or some other event. That would be great.
Yeah, it'd be great to meet you, and really appreciate you spending the time with us today.
Oh, I appreciate your interest as well.
Yeah, definitely good to talk to you and promote the Tandy brand. I hope it's a brand that lasts and stay successful for a long time to come. So,
thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us.
Welcome back to the Games Corner. Before we continue, I have a small bug report. On last month's episode, I had mentioned that cartridges for the Color Computer 3, a few of them was RoboCop and Predator, and John is also working on a cartridge with MMU, but what I meant to say is it's not MMU, it's bank switched memory. If you notice a water trickling sound in the background, I apologize. We've been getting a lot of rain over here lately, and that's the sound of my sump pump well filling up with water. It always makes me want to go pee. Okay, now that that's out of the way, let's get on with the segment. I really didn't have much planned for this month's Games Corner, so I'm just going to kind of wing it. However, I figured since I reviewed RoboCop last month, I'd do a quick mention of the game Predator. This was another game programmed by Greg Zumwalt. I was not familiar with this game from back in the day. I noticed Stevie Strobridge, the original gamer, and L. Curtis Boyle talking about it on the Color Computer Facebook group a few weeks ago, mentioning how terrible this game really is. Well, that got the best of my curiosity, so I had to pop in the cartridge and give it a whirl. The cartridge definitely looks cool. It says Predator. If it bleeds, we can kill it. It's kind of a neat looking cartridge, but unfortunately that's where it all goes downhill. Well, I can definitely agree with them that this is one frustrating game. I couldn't get past the first level. I tried and I tried. There are jumps you have to make on different platform levels that are so hard to do. Predator is another platform style game just like RoboCop, just with much higher difficulty. It is also the other memory bank switch cartridge made for the CoCo 3. This one has 64K storage capacity. RoboCop was the largest at 128K storage capacity. It was programmed by Greg Zumwalt for Activision in 1989. Requires a Color Computer 3 with standard 128K of memory. I'm not going to give up on this game. It's now a challenge for me to finish at least level 1. If you have this game, give it a try and see if you can get past level 1. I'd definitely like to hear about it. Well, sorry for this month's segment being so short. It's been a really busy month with VCF East coming up and of course followed by CoCo Fest. Game on and CoCo forever. Well, it's that time again. We have reached the end of the podcast. But there is some good news. When you hear us next month, it'll be just before CoCo Fest. If you're wondering, hey, how come there was no tech segment this month? It's because our host John Linville has been extra busy with things like working on his cartridge PCB development, the Glenside website, managing Retro Computer Challenge, and even regular life duties such as getting bookwork and taxes done. I personally don't know how he does it, so we apologize for not having a tech segment this month. Stay tuned for one next month. I just have a feeling he will have something lined up. I'd like to thank Darren Grant for giving us some of your time to record the interview. Last but not least, we can't forget to thank all of you for listening and supporting us each month. As I said before, it would be a silly thing to do this podcast each month just for ourselves. If you're planning on being at VCF East in Wall, New Jersey at the end of this month, please come find us. We will all be there. Well, until next month, happy CoCoing and CoCo forever.